up and running now, so those who are live streaming or rewatching the recording will be able to tune in. So thank you very much, everyone, for your patience on that one. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to this meeting. We welcome our members of the public, of course anyone live streaming, and also the media who is present. Just a reminder to everyone to please make sure your mobile phones are on silent, and we will take our first break at morning tea about 11 a.m. and if needed we'll take a lunch break about 1 p.m. Before we get underway though, I'd like to invite Councillor Barker to open up our hui with a karakia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Let us pray. Tutawa mai runga, tutawa mai raro, tutawa mai roto, tutawa mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tākie.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barker. I call for any apologies. There appears to be none. So we will carry on. Any declarations of interest this morning? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. I see on the agenda we have the proposed reserve lease for the Springfield Golf Course. I have been asked on several occasions whether I am in a conflict of interest over this issue. So I can confirm I live next to the Springfield Golf Course, adjacent to it. That is an interest that is in common with about 100 other properties in the area, so it's not a unique interest. I'm grateful to staff who have taken the trouble to get a legal opinion on this from Tompkins Wake. And if I may quote just a couple of paragraphs from that legal opinion. The likelihood of a financial gain or loss from the outcome of this decision on the lease is remote and entirely speculative. We do not consider that there is any pecuniary interest arising from the lease of the Springfield Golf Course. I would always also point out that it is common for politicians to run on platforms, and the High Court recognises that politicians do so. I and Councillor Patterson ran on the platform of saving Springfield, and so that is business as usual for politicians. I've never been on the committee of the Springfield Golf Club. I am an occasional player at the Springfield Golf Club. I do have a membership there, a pay-as-you-play membership. That being the case, I have carefully considered my obligations, and I am not in any conflict of interest. An additional issue was mentioned in the legal opinion, and that concerned predetermination. This part of the agenda does not deal with anything other than conflicts of interest. Predetermination is a judicially reviewable ground, and I have been careful since the beginning of my involvement in saving Springfield not to be predetermined, and for that reason I have engaged with Council, and I have asked the tough questions of Council. Initially, the justification for the Westbrook Sports Precinct concerned the poor quality of sports fields across town, and we obtained a council document that said that upgrading those sports fields to a acceptable
Sorry,
standard.
Rob, not to be rude, but point of order, Madam Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Lee, I was just going to bring you back into line of the
The
focus
question
of
was,
the Springfield.
does he have a
Yes.
interest, or does he need to declare an interest?
Yes, he's...
It's a pretty simple question, I think.
Well, it's putting on record, just in case there were any judicial reviews, why there's no predetermination here. And so what that council report showed...
Sorry, Councillor Lee, you're discussing a report that's outside of what we are discussing today, which is specifically the Springfield lease. Thank you for declaring your opinion on this matter. Is there any further points you wish to make?
Well, no, I accept your ruling, because predetermination is outside the scope of making a declaration of interest, but I have carefully avoided that.
Thank you very much. I do not have that legal advice in front of me, so I can't quote other areas of it, but I am aware that it does specifically mention that elected members, and this is not word for word because again I don't have it in front of me, but that elected members should not be involved in discussions or negotiations regarding that lease. So I still do have a concern that you have been involved in discussions. However, we do note that you have declared yourself that you do not have an interest. So thank you very much for that.
Could I just clarify, Mayor Tapsell, did you have a meeting recently with the Springfield Golf Club?
The Springfield Golf Club came and met with myself and the Chief Executive following our previous meeting at their own request.
So you have. Thank you.
Yes, but I confirm I did not discuss the lease. I do have concern that you have been discussing the lease directly with them. So that concern remains, but we have noted your point for the record as you've requested. Were there any other declarations of interest? There appear to be none. So we will move to any urgent items. Councillor Patterson.
Tēnā koe te manukura. Thank you for your indulgence. Just in the hope of demonstrating to our community that this council is committed to our stated priority of authentic engagement and communication, I submitted a notice of motion on the 16th of July 2024, which stated, Council requesting that I give notice I intended to move that Council instruct the Chief Executive to investigate the current and future plans for the Westbrook Sport and Recreation Precinct or any variation thereof, and report back to the most relevant committee, Council, meeting prior to the presentation of the Play, Active, Recreation and Sport Strategy. Now, as this is an item of significant public interest and the interest in maintaining our openness and transparency, would someone please clarify for the public record why this notice of motion was denied?
That is not an urgent item, Councillor Patterson. Urgent items, elected members, are not an opportunity for you to relitigate something that has already been assessed and sent to you and all of the councillors. So that notice of motion has been declined for reasons that I don't have in front of me. I wasn't anticipating that you would re-raise this, but that information has been circulated to elected members.
Madam Chair, we seem to have a problem with openness and transparency here.
No, we do not, Councillor Lee. We have opinion. We have an issue with people's opinion and playing politics when we are trying to get a job done. I am the chair of this committee, and it is very clear that that notice of motion was declined, and that is not an urgent item.
But that should be available to the public to see why it was declined. Otherwise, there's the potential for
that particular matter is coming to a council open discussion. It is very clear. We will be having that in a public and transparent manner for the community to see.
Why aren't notice of motions published with agendas together with reasons why they...
What is your point of order right now?
It's a point of clarification. It's in the public interest for the public to know what notice of motions have been submitted by elected members, and if they have been rejected by the chair, then it's a matter of for the public record.
That is not a point of clarity, Councillor Lee. You are stating your personal opinion on this matter. It will be put in the minutes. It will be made publicly available on why it was declined.
That's a month late. It's not a news item in a month's time.
The issue that is raised will come to council to be discussed in a public matter. The notice of motion that has been declined will be published in the public minutes.
Actually, I
so
think
we will move on now.
There's two notice of motions declined,
now,
is there not?
Lee.
Is there two?
Are there any other urgent items? Councillor Kiriopa.
Good morning. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Matara Mai, who are here sitting. Good morning. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge Matara Mai, who are here sitting here today. Also, for the purposes of public transparency, I'd like to understand why my motion, notice of motion for council to back the call for Matara Mai for ceasefire in Palestine, which also included the written support of 60 local businesses and signatures of over 1,100 individuals, was denied despite the fact that Whanganui District Council, Waiheke Island Local Board, Christchurch City Mayor and Environment Canterbury have all either called for a ceasefire or adopted policies that exclude trading with Israel organisations occupying Palestinian territory.
Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. Look, I appreciate that elected members and the public do have personal concerns and significant issues that they want to discuss. I remind all councillors that urgent items can be discussed at the meeting if it is a minor matter relating to the general business of this local authority. That is also the reason why it was not approved, because it is not the business of this local authority. So while we do really appreciate and we acknowledge that members of Mataura Mai is here, the Rotorua District Council looks after the Rotorua District, and we have done all we can in passing on these concerns to those that do have the power and control to be able to change that. So you have also had your notice of motion responded to, and that response in its entirety will be also added into the minutes. I apologise that we are not able to help more here in Rotorua. Thank you. Were there any other urgent items? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura Morena. Your Worship, I don't have an urgent item, but may I raise two items under the minor issues? The first one would be, could I ask about the steps, now that the resource applications for renewal of the those particular sites have been accepted by Council and publicly notified, could I ask what the steps are in place for those that haven't been an application for renewal, because I take it then that the expiry date in December is still in force?
Look, I'm very sorry, the staff member that probably could have answered that isn't present at the moment, but it will come for an update in the progress report at the Community and District Development Committee.
Thank you, I'll be more than happy to wait for that.
Thank you, and if you wish, we'll get that response as noted as an action point to be circulated to elected members, so that you're aware ahead of that.
Thank you. And just as my second minor matter, and I'm happy to either put it aside till that item, is regarding item 6.6 in regards Springfield. I'd like to move under Standing Order 3.5 that when we address that issue only, that we move aside to suspend standing orders. I just reflect on our meeting last time about this. There seemed to be a lot of give and throw. I believe we have an amendment. There may be further amendments. I believe it would be in our interest for us to suspend the standing orders, and I'm happy to move it and ask for a seconder.
Thank you. Do you mind just holding that until we get to the item?
Yes, because I'm only talking about that item only.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to ask a question through you to Una. Has there been a change in rules in how we operate now, which I haven't seen, when I thought two legitimate notice of motions from Councillor Patterson and Councillor Kiriopa.
Councillor Maxwell, that is not an urgent item. I'm sorry, elected members. We have standing orders for a reason. Urgent items, I'll explain again. That item is a minor matter relating to the general business of the local authority, and that no resolution, decision or recommendation may be made in respect to that item, except to refer that item to a subsequent meeting of the local authority for further discussion. That is an operational matter, Councillor Maxwell, and I have already stated that the notices of motions were declined, so they were unfortunately not legitimate, but that that review of it, for want of a better word, that review of it will be publicly put in the minutes as well for everyone to see.
I've never seen this happen in the time that I've been here at Council, where that is the only recourse that councillors can have if they give plenty of notice and it's
Councillor Maxwell,
I've
made a ruling that these are not urgent items.
Well, I didn't want it to be an urgent item. I wanted it to be a notice of motion.
And notices of motions that are relevant and that are appropriate to the business of council are taken and are accepted.
I think it's relevant.
You have... Okay. I'd just like to remind everyone that we are elected to act in the best interest of the Rotorua district. Playing politics at a table when we are here to get a job done is not being helpful to the community that we serve. So unless there are any other members that have urgent items, I would really like to get on to our business of the day, which is important to our residents.
Could I have the answer from Una?
No, that is not an
knows the
urgent.
rules?
Councillor Maxwell?
I'm disappointed.
No. Councillor Maxwell, I call order.
Madam Mayor, I'm
Councillor
going to
Maxwell,
express my disappointment.
Councillor Maxwell, I rule that that is not an urgent item.
It's
Your
not an urgent
behaviour
item.
is being
No, it's
disorderly,
not.
Councillor Maxwell.
It's not an urgent item.
Okay, I'm very sorry, elected members. I'm just going to have to call time for a short break until Councillor Maxwell can contain himself.
Oh. Well, I'm just disappointed.
Might I suggest, Madam Chair, we move on from here,
I would very much
so we
like
can
to
get
do
on
that.
with the
Councillor
business,
Maxwell,
and then
have
we
you
should
finished?
have a bit of a kōrero i roto i te rūmara āmuri atu nei. Yeah. We haven't even started.
I was always ready to carry on. There was a motion.
Okay. Now that we have order, I'd like to carry on with our business of the day, please. We will start with our confirmation of the minutes on page 6 of the agenda. And can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held 26th of June 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record? That's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Waru. Any items to be raised from that? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Now, the minutes of the council meeting held on the 3rd of July 2024. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Wang and Councillor Waru. Any items to be raised from that? I put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Now, I have requested that we bring the proposed reserve lease for the Springfield Golf Course first, just in the interest of those who may be attending in person or live streaming. So we'll take that item first. So that was item 6.6. That is on page 55 of your agenda. So, thank you. So we are picking this back up. There was a procedural motion for this to delay it until the following meeting, as Councillor Maxwell was not present. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We have the motion in front of us that, I'll just read it out, that Council direct the Chief Executive to commence negotiations to offer a 33-year lease with an initial term of between 3 and 10 years before the alternative use clause is activated, and such terms and conditions of a final lease be approved by the Council at a subsequent date. That was moved by Councillor Kai Fong and seconded by myself. So what we're going to do is I'll invite the Chief Executive to overview where we are at, and then also open up for questions. And following questions, because we already have a mover and a seconder, we will open up for debate then.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Sorry, just regarding my signal about my motion, will you deal with that when we come to discussion, or did you want to deal with it now for us to suspend the standing orders?
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. So just checking, is your standing order specifically regarding allowing multiple, like not the two and then the one, so it's open for anyone to provide discussion?
I think so, Madam Mayor, because if you look at our last meeting, there seemed, and I understand maybe there might be other amendments proposed as well, so I feel that if we could just open it up and take issues by issues, it would be more beneficial for this council to try and avoid some of the confusion of last time. But
yeah, I'm very happy to open it up for discussion from all those that need to. However, if elected members want to keep having discussion, we might, for the benefit of moving on, just move on at that stage. So happy to keep it more open in the standing orders as usual. Thank you for raising that. Councillor Kiru, is this a question?
I apologise, Your Worship, sorry. I did actually state I was moving it, and I would call for a seconder because, sorry, I did actually ask.
Yeah.
I did point out in 3.5, sorry, in my opening, that I would propose to set aside the standing orders for this item only.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor O'Brien. As Chair, I can just rule that, so that is okay. It does not need to require a mover and a seconder. So just confirming that you are able to have discussion The standing order that I believe Councillor O'Brien is referring to is where at times we only take 2 speakers for or against and then 1 speaker for or against and move on. That won't be the case. You will all have the opportunity to discuss. So I'd like to invite the Chief Executive to overview first and then we'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Worship. The purpose of my update is just to bring Council up to speed with the discussions that have been ongoing. Obviously, at the last meeting there was no decision, and so Council staff continued with the discussions we were having with the golf club, and I'm happy to give you an update on those discussions. So the discussions were primarily conducted by Mr. Collet and Mr. Piccatelli, who are in front of us at the moment. At the requests of the golf club, they requested a meeting with the Mayor and the Chief Executive. As a courtesy, we agreed. The Mayor joined that meeting initially and then left me as the Chief Executive to discuss terms and conditions with the golf club. And I'll give you a summary of our discussions, which have been productive and constructive. So I explained to the golf club that my direction actually received to the previous chief executive, which I was carrying on with, was to find a way to grant a lease to the golf club, even though the lease term doesn't end until 2027. I also explained the rationale for the alternative use clause, and that given that this is a significant asset to council, and that the term of 33 years was so significant, effectively 11 terms of council, that without having an alternative use clause in, it's likely that our significance and engagement policy would require us to consult the public widely about possible alternative uses. As I don't have any alternative uses identified to me at the present, doesn't mean that there isn't a reasonably foreseeable instance in the future that an alternative use might come up. And binding council to 11 terms without the opportunity to review that was something that I explained to the golf club would be quite challenging. The golf club was quite receptive to this and expressed their view that they would look for a certain amount of certainty, not necessarily the 33 years, in order to proceed with some investments that they talked about. So, look, our discussions were on the basis that are not inconsistent with the wording that is up there. Clearly, that's not a direction, hasn't been voted on, hasn't been directed by the council. But whatever discussions I have had are reasonably consistent with what is proposed. I was hopeful that the golf club would be able to be present and conclude and come to a conclusion that they also supported the terms and conditions that staff had worked on to put to yourselves for the vote. They need a bit more time for that. I'm confident that the discussions that we're having are productive, and that we'll work towards bringing something towards you to you for approval. Again, not inconsistent with what's on the screen in due course. I might pause there and take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Kirioka and then Councillor Lee.
Turn it off. Thank you. I don't have a question, but I'd just like to remind the Chair that I had foreshadowed an amendment to the original motion to remove the alternative use clause.
Thank you. May we get through questions first? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. The motion that we have on up there in front of us, which we had a month ago, would direct the Chief Executive to commence negotiations to offer a 33-year lease with an alternative use clause. Last month, there was a procedural motion, and there was that recommendation hasn't been decided by Council. Haven't you, as Chief Executive, acted beyond the powers given to you by the elected members by entering into these negotiations before we've authorised you to do so?
Would you like me to respond, Madam Chair?
If you're comfortable responding, I'm happy for you to respond, but Councillor Lee, I think that the nature of that question is very disrespectful. There have been a number of discussions with the golf course and our staff. That is the nature of getting to the point of us being able to approve it. It would not be at all outside of their expected roles or the direction of the council previously to negotiate a lease. So is there anything further you wish to add?
Yeah, to answer the question, have I exceeded my power? The answer is no.
Would you like to offer an explanation?
Councillor Lee, your question is incredibly disrespectful.
It seems to be in direct contradiction to the motion that's up on the board that wasn't decided upon last month, Madam Chair.
Any further question? And apologies, Councillor, but as I did mention, there already was a direction from this council to negotiate a lease with the golf course, which has been occurring over a number of months now, actually. So I look forward to hopefully providing some certainty, which is what we're doing today. Councillor Kaifong, followed by Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question then in regards to the proposed amendment that's to be put to suggest that the lease simply be an outright 33 years. Given that the suggested value of that land, if it was not used as a golf course, was something in the order of $30 million, would that not trigger the significance and engagement policy, which would require us to go out and consult with the whole wider community on whether or not that is an appropriate use to tie up that land for 33 years, given the value and the low value of the rental payment?
I might get some comments from the CFO first, but I might just take the opportunity to add that, as I explained, I wasn't acting in response to a draft resolution. I was acting under the direction given to the previous chief executive, which I was carrying out within what I have been directed to do by council in the past. To your question, Councillor Kaifong, yes, in theory that is correct. I'm not able to provide more details because I haven't got an alternative that I'm considering at the moment. I've been acting under the direction to facilitate giving the golf club a lease, not alternatives to that. And so the alternative use clause was a way of enabling that rather than putting barriers in front of that. I might ask the CFO to provide further comments on the commercial aspects that you've raised.
Thank you for you, Madam Chair. We'd need to do an actual assessment, but it is likely that it creates a bit of a challenge with regards to the need to consult. I think the challenge in front of us here is that, I think as the Chief Executive pointed out, it is Council's largest freehold piece of land. And locking this land up for such a length of time without giving the community options into the future with regards to its suitable use is the challenge. And I think for us, for myself particularly as Chief Financial Officer, looking forward and looking at what may occur into the future, and I don't know what the community may wish, but if Council was to look to lock this up for 33 years with no option of revisiting it, and then was to acquire similar value of land, we would be in a position at the moment where we'd be receiving $50,000 to $25,000 a year in rental, and then have to look to borrow $10, $20 million of external funds to acquire similar value. And the cost of servicing that would be $1.1 million to $2 million a year. And I think that's the flexibility that we need to give to our community into the future, that if our community decides that there is an alternative use, that there's appropriate consultation and appropriate flexibility and respect for both the community and the golf club for it to move forward. And that is the pure intent of that. There has been some comments made with regards to, I know a number of councillors have brought up Westbrook. There is no alternative use identified at the moment. All we're asking for you is there is no work going on Westbrook at the moment. That work stopped many years ago, and as you know, councillors, it is not in our long-term plan. All we're asking for you is to provide flexibility for the community that if it so decides into the future for an alternative use, that there is a mechanism to have a discussion through consultation and give appropriate notice for both parties to move forward, and that's all we're asking for.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm sorry, I'm going to ask for some leniency if I may, just so I can clarify some points here. So the motion before us today, based on the recommendations from last month's meeting, the motion doesn't include anything about rentals. So can I just clarify? So from the previous report recommendations, which since they're not included into the motion, where does that leave as far as the rental and also the compensation clauses, which aren't mentioned in your... Do you mind if I just clarify where we sit with those?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just get the Chief Executive to respond.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. My plan, if this motion were to pass, then what I would do is work with the golf club to propose those terms and then bring them back to you. The exact terms between 3 and 10 will determine in some part the rental, so I can't give you an answer on one without understanding where we land on the other. But all of that would come back to council based on that motion as it stands.
So, sorry, would that come under the such terms and conditions of a final lease? Is that where... I'm just concerned that
that's
since they're
correct.
not mentioned...
That's how I read it.
Okay, all right. My second question is, if we pass this today, what happens if the club declines this lease? Does it come back to us and we start all over again, or what's the...
We have discussed this with the golf club, and so short of the direction in front of us, their existing lease would continue, and at the expiry of that lease, we would look to offer them exactly the same lease on the same terms and conditions as what we're trying to get across the line now.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And just following that, I know certainly it's a question of the community. If we're not able to resolve renewing the lease, is it correct that there is no right of renewal in the current lease? And so if there is no new lease negotiated, is it correct that the golf course club's lease would just expire and will no longer be available as a golf course to that club?
That is correct. The maximum term of the lease was 33 years, and that was all that could be offered, and there is no right of renewal under the existing lease.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Could you refresh my memory from last month? I believe I had a reserves policy document in front of me, and it stated that the council policy for the Springfield Golf Course would be that it would remain a golf course.
If I can address that through you, Madam Chair. The policy you're talking about was the reserve management plan?
Yes.
Yeah. So the council's reserve management plan does enable the Springfield Golf Course to be on that site. It doesn't actually lock it in permanently, because the reserve management plan is such that it allows things to happen, but it doesn't actually say that it has to happen. That they're not have to happen.
But council policy is that it remains a golf course, correct?
As
stated in the reserves.
That's an allowed activity under the main Reserved Act, and I think the key point is that we are offering that golf course a lease so that it can continue to be a golf course. So yes, we're consistent with that.
So wouldn't an alternative use clause, so-called, be contrary to the current council policy that the Springfield Golf Course remain a golf course? There's no other use that's contemplated under the current reserve management plan.
The alternative use clause is not inconsistent with the policy, because the policy as the Chief Financial Officer has explained, defines permitted uses. The alternative use clause does not define any alternative uses. It just defines a provision whereby the community and council can make a decision on an alternative use at a future date.
Surely that would require a change of council policy if there is any other use for the golf course that's contemplated, which obviously there is with an alternative use clause.
Doesn't require a change of council policy, but it would require consultation with regards to the change of that use, and that is consistent with what is being offered with regards to the alternative use clause.
Again, I might reiterate that I am not aware, as the Chief Executive, of any predetermined view of an alternative use of this golf course. If other people are aware of a predetermined use of the golf course, I'm not aware of it. The alternative use clause, in my understanding, is to protect future councils, of which there are 11 that will appear over the course of this lease, from being bound to a decision of this council without any possibility of alternative uses. I haven't, by not knowing of one, I'm not able to certainly say that in the future the community will not come up with one.
Just following on from that, I do have a question regarding the alternative use as well. It is known and evidenced through Bapalini Regional Council reports that there is significant flood risk of the Utahina River, and that at present that also includes Ohinemotu Village. And so the public reserve there as a strategic asset has also been identified as an area for potential stormwater detention, of course, which will be needed once the new homes in Pukehangi arise. So in terms of an alternative use clause, does that also protect the ability for council to use part without diminishing the availability of that golf course for use of recreation, to use part of that reserve to protect all homes surrounding the Utahina River and also Ohinemotu from flooding, just so that our community get an idea, because the Westbrook precinct is very clearly not in the long-term plan, and so no longer exists in any current or future council plans.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that is a very good example of a potential alternative use that the community and council may need to consider in the future.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just got a couple of questions around process, if I may, just to get some clarity. We've talked about the Westbrook Sports and Recreation Precinct a number of times already, so it is relevant. The Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held Thursday, 14th October 2021, passed point 7.2 Westbrook Sport and Recreation Precinct 4, item 4, that the committee support officers completing a comprehensive play, active recreation and sport plan to inform future decisions on the Westbrook Sport and Recreation Precinct and the Springfield Golf Course. That was moved and carried. So my question is, looking at the standing orders, Standing Order 24, revocation or alteration of resolutions, and also 24.2, revocation must be made by the body responsible for the decision. So I've looked through the council minutes of the following actual council meetings, not the committee meeting, and because this is just a recommendatory committee, it's not a committee that can make a resolution that had to be approved by council. Nowhere was that actually approved by council. So my question is which one of these clauses was used to overturn that decision, to no longer progress this? Where was that done? Because I can't find any record of it. Therefore, if it's not been done, it's still there. So if someone could please clarify that, please.
So I think I might respond initially as it's a political question, and if any of the staff wish to also add a response, then they're welcome to do so. Councillor Patterson, we have reiterated to you a number of times that it is the council that makes this decision. The council made the decision to not include the Westbrook precinct into our long-term plan, therefore it no longer exists. It was not a requirement.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Misrepresentation. At what point did council make a decision not to include the Westbrook Sports Precinct into the long-term plan?
That's not a point of order, that's not misrepresentation, but I will respond to this matter before I continue with responding to Councillor Patterson. This council made that decision when we adopted the long-term plan. We also discussed and draft the PARS report in LTP workshop, which from memory, I think was in September 2023. So that has already been discussed. Councillor Patterson, just further to your point, that the Westbrook precinct is no longer there. It has not been allocated in our long-term plan. It will not happen in the foreseeable 10 years, and that long-term plan has also been independently audited by Audit New Zealand as well. You will have the opportunity soon in a council meeting or workshop to discuss, and that will be public, the PARS report in more detail, and so I hope that you are able to be provided further information that you require then.
Thank you for that. So the
point of order. The long-term plan,
point of order?
Misrepresentation once again. I believe the long-term plan that we adopted was silent on the Westbrook Sports Precinct. There was no explicit decision made with reference to the Westbrook Sports Precinct. Am I wrong?
So your point of order of misrepresentation is not correct. You are correct, though, that it was not in the LTP because it does not exist. But I will ask staff if there's anything that they wish to include in this response to your question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I guess having been part of the previous LTPs, I guess I'm more than happy to provide some guidance and support exactly as you said. I think there's some confusion here with regards to when we talk about Westbrook and the proposal, as I think two councillors are referring to a proposal that was put out to the community that involved a development on a golf course, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. And that proposal hasn't moved forward since then. In the previous LTP, we did look to have an investment onto our sports fields, which so happened to be at Westbrook and Rayboard Park. And so at times when we do refer to Westbrook, there is a sporting complex currently there, but not, I think, to what some of the councillors are moving towards. And you made a conscious decision into the LTP, as Her Worship mentioned, to remove any further investment into that sports fields into that area, both currently Westbrook and Rayboard Park, with the exception of Titoki Place. And so Her Worship is correct.
And sorry, you had a question?
Point of order, actually. I have the misrepresentation.
Sorry, what is your point of order?
So I have in front of me here the long-term plan for 2021, and it contains 9 references to the Westbrook Sports Precinct.
Point of order, Madam Chair. 2021. Relevance.
Relevance. The relevance is that it has been claimed at this table.
If you just pause for a moment, please. We have had 2 point of orders on relevance. Thank you for raising the long-term plan in 2021. I can confirm in the 2024 long-term plan, which we've adopted, that now overrides any of the previous long-term plans. So what we have currently adopted is the only plan, and if it is not in there, then it is not included.
That doesn't satisfy my point of order, I'm afraid, Madam Chair. So it was claimed by the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief Executive that the Westbrook Sports Precinct has never been. There's no point of order here.
My point of order is that what are we actually discussing here? Are we discussing a lease for Springfield, or are we discussing a Westbrook sports field? This is a circus.
What we can't have is misrepresentations being made at this table.
Order, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Waru has reiterated his point of order on relevance. That is correct. If we could please ensure that our discussion remains on the motion before us, which I'm sure Springfield would be delighted that this council actually has a motion in front of us to renew the lease for 33 years. So I do bring us back to the discussion that is before us right now, which is that we are currently directing the Chief Executive to commence the negotiations to offer a 33-year lease with an initial term between 3 and 10 years with the alternative clause.
Point
so
of
are
order.
there any further... What is your point of order?
Misrepresentation.
And what is that?
It's been stated by the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer that the Westbrook Sports Precinct was not in the previous long-term plan. The Westbrook Sports Precinct is defined by the master plan, which is 125
Point of order,
pages
Madam
long,
Chair, that's not what they
and
said.
that is in the 2021 master plan.
Okay, order.
9 times.
Councillor Lee, that is not a point of order, and I will correct for the record.
And we have not voted
Councillor Lee,
against the
can you
Westbrook
please
Sports
contain
Precinct.
yourself? I called order. Can you please contain yourself? Elected members, there is a reason why we need order in here, so that we can discuss our matters in a respectful and fair way. I do want to correct the record that what you've stated the staff member said is not correct, and your point of order is also not accepted. So we will carry on with the questions. I'll go Councillor Brown and then Councillor Patterson and then Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to the CEO or those negotiating with Springfield. Do you feel, given previous discussions, that you will likely reach an agreement with the golf course?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Quite a challenging question to answer. I've been directed, I've been acting under a direction given to the previous Chief Executive to do whatever I can to facilitate a reasonable and fair lease. So I'm working towards that. I've had a productive discussion with the golf club. As Councillor O'Brien's questions earlier, this is also a function of the cost, which we haven't discussed here, because the longer tenure we provide to the golf club, the higher the annual rental is the advice we've got from our valuers. Now, in the interests of the wider ratepayers' concerns and potential further impacts of this decision in terms of removing alternatives, that's something that we need to balance, and I expect to bring back to council a view that I, as a staff, can recommend to council and is supported by the golf club. So that's what I'm working towards. If I get to a point where that's not possible, or I believe that's not possible, I will bring the matter back to council for further discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back to my questions that I was trying to get to. So I thank you for clarifying that we don't need to do a revocation over a previous decision. We did that for the reserves and the representation review bill, but we don't need to do that for this. So that's fine. I understand that. But I would like to ask about this particular motion. If this particular motion, just to clarify, what are we actually doing here today? Are we withdrawing the proposed lease already presented to the golf club to replace it with the one that we decide upon here, or what's the point? What are we doing?
As the chair, I'm very happy to confirm that the whole point of this is because the current lease expires in 2027. That was a 33-year lease, as we've heard, with no right of renewal. So unless there is a lease renewed, that golf course club will no longer have a lease or the ability to play. So we as a council have been supportive of bringing these lease negotiations forward so that we can provide the certainty of a new 33-year lease. Remembering the last one specifically noted no right of renewal, so it wouldn't have automatically lapsed, and also to provide certainty to the nearby residents as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do understand that, but a lease has already been presented to the club, so why are we bothering to do this? The lease is being presented, so it's in their hands. They can choose to say yes or no. What's the point of this discussion now?
So that we can direct the Chief Executive as to what the terms are for negotiation.
Elected members, I've been having to call order a number of times. If you could please respect this room, this process and these roles as elected members, and act in ways that are respectful and also fair so that others are able to be given the time to respond and also able to share their particular views without being shut down by points of orders. So we will keep the discussion relevant to what's on the table currently of the renewal of a 33-year lease, but I will just see if the Chief Executive wishes to respond to provide clarity on the process for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Patterson, typically staff would conduct negotiations on leases and then bring it to council to agree. In this case, a number of councillors, including yourself, I believe, asked for an update to be brought to council, which is why this original paper was brought to council with the explicit terms and conditions to be completely transparent with everyone based on councillors' requests that we bring this item to council. So in terms of the direction, we started with the staff recommendation. There's an alternative now on the table. There's a motion. Based on whatever motion passes, I will take instructions from this council and proceed with whatever I'm directed to do. And then, as it's written, come back to council with the final document subject to an agreement with the golf club, as I explained in my response to Councillor Brown's question. And so that would be the next step.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair Manakura. Something of a follow-up to my previous question, which was about if the club declines our offer or terms in the lease, what happens if we don't make a decision today? Could someone enlighten me if we're unable to come to pass either this recommendation or amendments? Where does that leave us in the future? As Mr. Colley said, the lease runs out in a couple of years. Are we staff able to bring this back up at some point? I mean, I'm just asking, please, if we could, what happens if things don't pan out today?
Sorry, I'll just double check on that.
Thank you.
I was just checking because sometimes there is a time limit of re-raising certain issues, but it would not be the case with this. But I'll just see if the Chief Executive has any further response.
Just so I'm clear, so I'm not talking about postponing again, I'm talking like if this amendment and others are not moved or progressed, if I could use that, if that's better terminology, where does that leave us in the future?
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, just to clarify, with my time limit, I meant sometimes if you raise an item and it's declined, like there might be a year or so as an example before you can renegotiate that. But sorry, Thomas, you had a response?
No, I'm more than happy to answer that. So in the case of where leases expire and what can happen. So if council already has an alternative use, then the lease would expire. And this is across the board with regards to all our holdings, and that occupier would move on and then the new leasee would come on board. That is not the case with regards to the golf course. So if this golf course lease expires and we aren't in a position where we've renewed a new lease, we would likely go to the golf club and offer them a short-term lease while we negotiated a longer-term lease similar on these circumstances. So no, we wouldn't be asking the golf course to vacate on the termination of their lease, but it's hoped that before we get to that, we can do that. But legally, yes, once the lease is up, the golf course would legally be required to move off that land.
Thank you for that. And so, sorry, just so I'm clear on this, in case things pan out how you may not want, we can address this issue again at a future council meeting, even in short term. I know I just want to be clear on this because people may have to vote on this, so I just hope people understand clearly where we sit.
Thank you, Councillor. As I said, I'm operating under the direction given to the previous Chief Executive to make this happen, so I'm working towards that. If we don't get a decision today, I'll continue to work towards that. And at a subsequent council meeting, if there's a revised direction that council wants to give me, I will provide some advice on whether that's feasible based on the circumstances at the time.
So forgive me, so if we vote this amendment down and any others, you'll still progress on negotiations anyway with the club, which I understand, but I just want members to understand where we sit if we don't make progress today.
Thank you. We've just double checked in terms of the time limit. So if a motion or recommendation is voted down, there is a 6-month limit time frame before it can be brought back to the council, which won't impact the golf course in terms of a 2027 lease, but it will delay the ability to be able to confirm that lease for 6 months. We've had confirmed. That's right. Negotiations could continue, but there certainly would not be a recommendation for a finalisation of adoption of a lease until 6 months.
Thank you for that. Could I just make one other observation? Sorry, I know we're still in questions, but could I just ask perhaps you as chair, once questions are completed, before we move to discussion, could I perhaps suggest we have a break before we move on to discussions? Because I just feel that might be an opportunity for some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, te manukura, o tira tātou katoa kua hui nei tēnei roto I tēnei whare, tēnā koe, Uncle Trev, kia tūranga tira tonu koe, kia tūranga tira. Just wanted to ask, it was sort of on the tail end of that other corridor around the reason we're doing this at the moment. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this was at the request of the golf club themselves. Can we please clarify that for me, or expand rather on that?
Councillor, that is correct, which I failed to mention is we are doing this because the golf club has asked us to renew the lease. And that's what we're working towards, renewing the lease while also ensuring that future councils and our community has options available to them through quite rigorous, robust processes with regards to changes to the reserve management plan and public consultation.
Thank you for that clarification. And maybe my next question might be aimed at our Chief Executive. Would you say that this motion gives you a more, I suppose, focused parameter in which to have these discussions?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Well, how can I word this? Long-term leases, I'm not a fan, to be quite honest. I'm one of many roto I te iwi, victims of these 99-year perpetual lease things that happened in the past. I am, however, okay with the 33-year given, but there needs to be flexibility, and I think that's what all you're asking for in the alternative clause, alternative use clause being added into these negotiations. So I'm okay with that, and given the kōrero around Ohere and things that might be required and might need to happen in the future, I'll be supportive of it. Kia ora.
Thank you. I think we've had a lot of questions and we're starting to stray into discussion. I'll just call for any final questions. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your indulgence. Just one final clarification on this. So the lease that was presented to the club at their request last week or whenever it was, if we change our minds here and set different parameters, will we have to, as the council, go back to them and say, sorry, council have now decided this? Is that the way the next process would work?
That's correct, Councillor. I will follow the direction of the council.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manukura, for your leniency. If you don't mind, just one quick question. If we pass this motion as is written here today, but then the club declines the lease, we don't have to wait for that 6 months. We could just continue on because we've passed the motion? Is that what I understand? If the motion is passed, but the club and ourselves are not able to come to a signature of a lease,
Yeah. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult to answer.
Thank you. Sorry, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah, we don't know what the club will come back with.
No, I'm just saying if they if we pass this as is to give the CEO and staff an opportunity to negotiate, but we couldn't successfully conclude those negotiations, the time frame can keep going. We don't need to wait for 6 months or anything like that. I just want members to understand the difference between declining this today, where we don't make progress, and then putting it into the club's hands.
Thank you, Councillor. A really good procedural question. So my understanding is that I would continue to try to get some agreement, but we wouldn't bring this matter back to Council for another 6 months.
But the matter will come back to Council. Yes, yes. So the benefit of the recommendation that was suggested based on the discussion of the last meeting by Councillor Kaifong and supported by myself was that it actually allows it to be incredibly flexible, that the Chief Executive is able to negotiate between 3 to 10 years. So that is as flexible as we can make it, but it also allows our Chief Executive to be able to finalise that, and hopefully the golf club would find this favourable, and the next time it will be coming back to us for final approval of that lease. If not, then yes, as we've heard, 6 months, and hopefully we've had some progress since then.
Thank you. And could I just ask the mover and you as seconder, would you bear any changes to the initial term of between 3 and 10, before 3 and 10 years before the alternative use clause is activated, potentially activated?
Sorry, what particular part are you suggesting?
So I'm just asking about the time frame, because if this is passed, the negotiations have to have an initial term before the alternative close of between 3 and 10 years.
Thank you.
Are you prepared to move on? Would either of you be prepared to move on, extend that, or is that how you feel? Thank you.
I'll ask the mover of the motion.
I think it's we don't need to get into trying to reword and re-wordsmith this. My original recommendation was based on the paper that was put to us at the last council meeting. In the council recommendation, there were 2 options given to us. There was option 1, which was to approve it with a 3-year alternative use clause with 12 months notice. The second option was to approve with the 10 years with the 2 rights of renewal. The paper also mentioned that that was after the golf course had received legal advice, and that was their recommendation back to council staff, and that is why the paper contained both recommendations of the 3 years, which was the council staff recommendation, and the 10 years, which was the golf course recommendation. So my motion allowed flexibility within the parameters of the 2 recommendations and the 2 sets of discussions that had been taking place, but still left flexibility for the Chief Executive to negotiate the final terms and conditions, and it also allowed Council the final ability to sign off whatever the terms and conditions were. So I think that it's probably, I would not at this stage be amenable to amending that motion. I'd like to see if we put that to the vote where that came to, but I think that based on the papers that were already in the council meeting and the discussions that have been had already, then that reflects the discussions that have taken place thus far.
Thank you. And as the seconder of the motion, I'm happy for it to remain the same based on the reasons given by Councillor Kaifong, but also because I would really just like us to be able to progress this and provide certainty to the club. And so I see that this is a way for the Chief Executive to be able to negotiate between all of the recommendations that are provided, but also for us to be able to move forward. It has been a very long time since this has been in negotiations. So we are taking final questions now. We have a final question from Councillor Patterson, and then a final question. This is your second, and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Te Manakuta. Just clarifying what I just heard, that there was an option of 10 years with 2 rights of renewal. Where was that? Sorry?
In the paper. The previous report when this was discussed.
Recommendation 2, 3, 4, 5. Where does that say that?
It's in the council paper.
Well, why isn't it in the recommendations? Okay, all good.
The recommendations were the staff recommendations of what we should do, but the report was the further information of options available. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Just going back to the issue of flood risk that was raised earlier, my understanding was Stavros considered the use of the Springfield Golf Course for flood mitigation, and he has abandoned that idea in favour of dredging of the lower Utahina stream. Am I mistaken there?
The councillor stated that correctly as a potential project. However, we have not clarified whether that is the best way forward. We're currently, and I think Stavros has advised you previously, we are doing some flood modelling. There is also another partner involved in the lower Utahina, which is the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So the potential of that project, while he has stated is better, we do not have an answer or any certainty. And again, this goes to probably the longer term questions about what might we need to do once we're through the IAF projects and those focus areas in the central and western parts of the city.
My next question pertains to my recollection of the ProDrive lease arrangement, which ended up being a 15 plus 10.
Apologies, that is not relevant to this
discussion. I'm about to ask the question, Madam Chair. So is it the policy in the council delegation manual that staff approve leases up to 10 years, and other than that, leases that are longer term than that come before council? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, leases over 10 years come to council.
Right, so there was mention before, which I didn't quite follow, about 6 months delay if this was to come back to council. Where does the 6 months come from? I didn't catch that, sorry. I mean, this could be brought back to council by a notice of motion next month, could it not, if it went nowhere from here?
No, that's not correct, but we'll get staff to answer your question.
Thank you. Through you, the Chair. There are standing orders around discussion and ongoing discussion around items that come onto an agenda. This has been part of a procedure which was back on this agenda because of a procedural motion that you brought in last month. However, a decision, whether it is, and in particular this one, if it is lost, you can't have the conversation again within a period of 6 months. So if this decision is lost today, as has already been explained, the Chief Executive would continue to work with the golf course, but we would not be able to bring it back for you onto an agenda for a minimum of 6 months.
Okay, have you got the standing order for that?
No, but we'll note it as an action point to circulate to elected members.
Great, thank you. Next question is for the Mayor. I know you campaigned on the Springfield Golf Course, and this was mentioned in your advertising literature, and I know a lot of people at Springfield voted for you in that respect. Would your
Councillor
support...
Lee, would you like to keep this
support,
relevant to the recommendation that we've got in front of us, not on what not he said, she said?
Yes, and if I'm not interrupted, I'll get there quicker. The second, you've seconded this motion. Is that consistent with your election promises?
Councillor Lee, that is not a relevant question.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions that are relevant to the motion that we have before us? Final question from Councillor O'Brien and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you to Manukura, and thank you very much for your leniency, especially with me anyway. Thank you. But I hope you found the questions at least helpful, and certainly for us councillors to be able to make decisions today. If the motion before us is defeated, defeated, where do we sit with Councillor Kiriopa or any other amendments?
So Councillor Kiriopa has yet to put her amendment.
Sorry, that's why I'm asking. If we defeat this motion, how then can we amend the defeated motion? Sorry.
it's my understanding that she will. So what I'd like to do once questions are concluded is we'll take a short break, and then when we return, we'll start with the ask Councillor Kiriopa what her foreshadowed amendment is at that stage, and then discuss. And then the amendment will have to be, if it has a second, it will have to be discussed first, put to the vote, and then if it is lost, we will return to the current recommendation that we have, as long as the amendment is not in not the direct opposite of what the current recommendation, and which would it be the only case it won't be allowed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm going to take one final question from Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. This is just going back to what was raised around conflicts of interest, so I'd like to just question now the question of predetermination and what that actually means. We've heard the councillors say that, yes, you can stand on platforms when you're out electioneering to be elected. However, now that councillors have been elected to this table and are making decisions about something, is it appropriate that they are posting videos on Facebook and making public comments which shows a clear predetermination to an issue? So the question is, in that situation, should the councils be considering whether or not they should remove themselves from the table and the decision?
Could I also add to that, Your Worship, then in that case, does that also include previous public servants that have made, during council meetings, that have made opinions and all that publicly stated? If it's sauce for the goose, it's sauce for the gander, is it not?
I think that it is a very valid question to raise. We'll just have to check. Apologies, I don't have the legal advice in front of me because I didn't think that would be relevant today. But what I suggest is we take a short break now, and then we can return in 20 minutes, and we can answer that question before we go to Councillor Kiriopa and then carry on with discussion on this item. Thank you. So we will return at 11:10. No mai hoki mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera. Welcome back to our council meeting. We have the motion in front of us and we are about to open up for questions. I'll read the motion as it currently, discussion, thank you. I'll read the motion as it currently is. The Council direct the Chief Executive to commence negotiations to offer a 33-year lease with an initial term of between 3 and 10 years before the alternative use clause is activated, and such terms and conditions of a final lease be approved by the Council at a subsequent date. I will open up for questions very shortly, but I'll now go to Councillor Kiriopa, who has foreshadowed an amendment.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Sorry, just in regards Councillor Kaifong's comments about return, are we addressing that or are we leaving it on the table?
I'd be happy to speak to that.
Oh, sorry, I'll address the Chair. So.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. You are correct. We'll just see if there is any response required for the question. Sorry, Councillor Kaifong, would you like to ask your question?
Sorry, just going back to the question I asked before the morning tea break, that wasn't a question for councillors to answer individually. It was just from a conflict of interest, predetermination position? What is the general parameters around that for a council meeting?
Thank you. The Chief Executive has pulled up the legal advice, so we'll just get him to respond by signalling what is actually in there.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't read out the whole advice, all councillors have it, and as referred earlier, I got it for the benefit of councillors. So the question was, a risk may arise to council's decision on the lease if any councillor takes part in the decision making and is subsequently found to have predetermined the matter. So, and then the item 18 goes on to say, would a fair-minded observer reasonably think that the decision maker or member of the decision making body might not bring an impartial mind to the decision in the sense that they might unfairly treat someone's case with favour or disfavour? So I guess those are the excerpts that perhaps Councillor Kaifong might be referring to in the advice that was obtained by staff for the benefit of all elected members in this decision making. Thank you.
So forgive me, so as a follow-up, does that also include public statements that perhaps councillors that were previously councillors on previous councils have also made? If they've expressed opinions about, that would also apply, would it not?
Forgive me, Councillor, I'm not an expert on the law. I was merely reiterating what advice has been provided, and I believe the guidance was for councillors to make that risk-based determination on their own.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Does that address your question? Thank you. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Kaifong. So I now go to Councillor Kiriopa for her amendment.
Thank you. I'd like to move an amendment to remove the alternative use clause. I don't believe that benefit and worth of land holdings should be measured by council just in monetary terms or value of land. Locking up an urban green corridor with fully mature trees for future generations is not a risk, in my opinion. I do not support intensification at the expense of precious green spaces, so I do not support an alternative use clause unless it specifically refers to flooding. So that's my motion, is to remove the alternative use clause. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just quickly seek some advice.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Procedure, according to the Standing Orders 23.7, foreshadowed amendments, the meeting must dispose of an existing amendment before a new amendment can be foreshadowed. So we've got to deal with this one first before Lani can bring hers.
Yeah, thank you. That's the advice I was just going to check. So I'll just quickly do that now to make sure that we get this right. I'll respond to you in just a minute, Councillor Kiriopa.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that is correct. Also, as it has been worded by Councillor Kiriopa, you can't just remove a part of a motion that would be seen as a direct negative. So the fact that what you've put on the table is a direct negative would come in before the foreshadowing, Councillor Patterson, that you have spoken about. So either way, you will need to deal with what you have as the substantive motion on the table now.
So sorry, just for clarification, does that mean that once we've dealt with this, and depending which way it goes, then we can make an amendment to that?
Thank you. I'll just check that as well.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, following voting on the above, depending which way that goes, you will either have carried the motion or you have nothing on the table. Therefore, if it's, let's say it is lost, a new motion would have to be put forward and discussed and then put to the vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Kiriopa?
Can I just foreshadow then that if this motion doesn't pass, that I'll just alter what my motion was, and that's to not support that the alternative use clause specify for flooding purposes rather than anything else.
Thank you. What I suggest is we take the motion first as is required, and then if that is voted down at that point, we can get written up for all of us to consider if that's necessary.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Sorry, could I just clarify? So, given your previous advice about if this motion's defeated, how can we at the same meeting then revisit it again? When, we previously talked about 6 months. Sorry to bring this up, but we seem to be contradicting what we just said.
No. The subsequent notice will depend on what the outcome of the discussion today is. So you have a substantive motion on the table right now that needs to be voted on. If that is voted down and no other motion is put on the table to give staff direction, there is nowhere for council officers to continue on with negotiating the lease.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will open up for...
Another process question. Does it not mean that because this was an amendment to an original recommendation that it reverts back?
This was a procedural motion.
Right.
So
no, that was
this recommendation was put as it was, with a mover and a seconder, and then there was a procedural motion to delay it until this meeting?
Yes, that's this motion, but does the process not mean that if this fails, it goes back to the original recommendation presented to Council?
I'll let our staff advise us.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. No, it doesn't revert back. There was no prior motion on the table. This was the only motion that was put on the table. It was moved and seconded, and then the procedural motion came into play. What you had, which showed up on the screen on the day of the meeting, was the staff recommendation, and that was never moved or seconded. What you've got up on the screen now came in. So this is the substantive and the item in front of you for voting on today.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. We'll open up for all questions now. We'll go Councillor Waru, then Kiriopa. Debate. Apologies. We're open for debate. I'm
just seeking a clarification on a point.
Yes.
Is that okay? Just around the going back to the substantive motion and when it's lost. So and then there is no direction. I'm just making sure that our CEO actually has a directive now he is following. It's not this. So he would revert back to that. Is that correct?
It's somewhat frightening to think that I might not get direction at this meeting, but if there's no direction got at this meeting at all, then I will continue with the previous direction I've been given.
Thank you.
If I get a different direction at this meeting, we'll proceed with the different direction I'm given.
So just checking before we open up for discussion, were there any final questions or clarification?
Yes, please.
Sorry, was yours a question, Councillor Kiriopa, or would you like to?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
I'd just like to understand if this doesn't go through, then my request that an alternate motion, that the alternative clause use be specific to flooding, use for flooding, is that not an option that we can go back to?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we will have to put this one to the vote first, and then following that, open up for any other suggested recommendations that could come forward with such as the amendment that you've suggested. Okay. Councillor, does that answer your question?
So I think if this, as I understand it, if this motion fails, then we can, somebody else can move a motion, and we can take it from there and debate that.
And final question from Councillor Kaifafong.
This is a question of clarification. So if this motion is lost and then we're putting alternative other motions on the table that haven't been discussed, haven't been thought of, we don't know the implications of, we don't have staff reports, so obviously there's still work being done around stormwater, and the question I raised before around the significance and engagement and the need to consult with the community. So are we getting ahead of the discussion with alternative motions if we haven't had a staff report into the pros and cons of whatever has been proposed, and also whether we needed to go out for significance and engagement and community consultation?
Thank you. Certainly, as the chair, if there is a recommendation that's put forward that does require staff advice or community consultation, then we will have to consider that at that time. We do have a significance and engagement policy that guides us on the levels of threshold that would then trigger needing to do that. Thank you. Okay, so we will now open up for discussion.
As the mover chair, I'd just like to signal I'd like to speak at the end after I've heard from the other speakers.
And just a reminder, we do have 5 minutes, so hopefully you don't take that long. So we open up to the floor for any discussion on the motion that we have before us. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's before us is a so-called alternative use clause, which has otherwise become known as the guillotine clause. The reason it's become known as the guillotine clause is the guillotine...
Point of order, Your Worship. Just recording of words, that's not appropriate. I think it's been very clearly stated that it's not a guillotine clause and the word guillotine is not appropriate.
I believe that was raised at the previous time as well, Councillor.
I would like to respond to that, Madam Chair.
Guillotine is a disrespectful word, and that was asked of you in the previous meeting, if you can refrain from using that, and it would also be misrepresentation.
No, I won't refrain, because this is a matter of freedom of speech, and I'm entitled as an elected member to speak, to use the English language, to use expressions as I please, and if other people have sensitivities, well, poor old them. I'll speak as I wish. Thank you.
Councillor, you are more than welcome to speak, but we do also have within our standing orders the requirement to not conduct yourself in a disorderly manner. So you are welcome to your freedom of speech. Guillotine is a French word, by the way. And you have already been asked to not use that, but please continue.
The guillotine was an effective machine designed to kill people, and it was used through the French Revolution to huge effect. The purpose of a guillotine clause in a golf club lease is to kill a golf club. It serves no other purpose.
Councillor Lee, you have just explained exactly why the use of that word is not appropriate. Can you please refrain from doing so, or I will have to ask you to apologise and withdraw the word. I am trying to allow you to continue with your discussion.
Under which standing order would you ask me to withdraw that, Madam Chair?
Sorry, what did you say?
Under which standing order would you ask me to withdraw?
Under standing order 20.4, and then also, which is disorderly conduct, and also I would probably put this also into 20.2, behaviour consistent with code of conduct. And if you give me time, I'm pretty sure there's one in here specifically around language as well. So whatever that standing order is too.
I've just had a look at disorderly conduct. It doesn't say anything about choice of words or use of expressions. Standing order 20.4.
Councillor Lee, I have ruled as chair. I would like you to be able to continue your discussion, if you would like to, please.
I would like to. Thank you. Before being elected, I served as the founding president of Saving Springfield. It is my view that the guillotine clause is inconsistent with Saving Springfield. A vote in support of such a clause is a vote to destroy the golf course, if not immediately, then in due course. And I'll paint a scenario for you to help illustrate that, members. There's going to be an election in 2025, in 2028, and 2031. So if the golf course is given an 8-year grace period, shall we say, before the guillotine triggers can be pulled, then that would allow the incoming council in 2021 to do a special consultative procedure that council could then listen to what the community have to say, and if it's anything like the last 3-4 years since I've been involved, the community will be very loud in saying, council, that's a dumb idea. The council will then be at liberty to ignore that advice, which the previous council, I think, was well known for. And so that council in 2032 could pull the trigger, and with that means that the golf course's life would come to an end before the next election. So that is what is reasonably foreseeable if we vote in favour of such a clause. I will therefore not recommend supporting this option for those elected members who ran on the platform of Saving Springfield. And I would recommend to the golf club that they do not accept such a clause either. I think that a better deal is available to the club to ensure the future of the club, to ensure that the club is saved. It's been there 75 years now. It's at the heart of that community. And in essence, it's a reserve. The zoning changed about a decade ago to residential 1. That was never consulted on. So council seems to be in breach of Section 82 of the Local Government Act for not consulting on that change. In any event...
apologies, Councillor, that is misrepresentation.
You're entitled to your opinion, Madam Chair. That could be
I'm
the subject
entitled to set the record straight when an elected member says something that is not only disrespectful but misrepresenting the facts.
That would be for the court to decide in due course if a judicial review was necessary, Madam Chair.
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Just catching my thoughts after the latest interruption. Yes, that's where I was. The community, the previous council attempted to dispose of 10 reserves, and the golf course is in essence Rotorua's biggest reserve. That's how the community view it, and we all know, us elected members, what the community think of disposing of reserves. Community don't support it. This council was there at the start of this term, and the first thing we did was reverse the previous council's attempt to dispose of those 10 reserves. Now's the time to treat the golf course like a reserve, like it ought to be, and do what the community have asked us to do, bearing in mind that Councillor Patterson and myself have received over 5,000 votes running on this platform. Thank you.
Who would like to be the next speaker, if there is any? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you to Manakura. I'll take a little different tact. As you probably gathered, I'm a procedure person. I like to make informed decisions based on information and fact. I ask questions when I don't get those, and they still remain unanswered to my satisfaction. When I've been questioned about predetermination, firstly, you have to be provided with an alternative that you can decide upon before it's predetermined. Because if you haven't been presented with any alternatives, You're only operating on the information you've got at hand. So far, in this council has never been presented with actual alternatives for that ground. No one's ever said, well, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. We've never talked about it as councillors. And I would love to see that brought into the debate so we can decide going forward what is right, what is just, what is the right use for that golf course. If it turns out that it's not a golf course, I would be persuaded by that. But so far, I've never been presented with any alternative use that would make me think, you know, this place that's been there for 75 years, we should look at something else. So I would really love to see some alternatives presented to us before we make any decisions on this. However, we're at. So talking to this motion, again, I will talk about the alternative use because that is my hang-up. It's just too airy-fairy. What does it actually mean? I asked Mr. Colley that, and he said exactly what that means, Councillor. Alternative. Okay, well, how about some clear definitions? Councillor Keriopa talked about stormwater. That is a clear option. What other options are there? Because it's too open to interpretation. If we're to persist with this, I would strongly recommend we remove the alternative use clause or actually get a comprehensive list of examples put into it so that the people of Rotorua know what potentially this could be used for. Otherwise, we're floundering in the dark. Information is what we need to make sound decisions, and frankly, we don't have enough. This golf course has been there for 75 years. It's not ours. It belongs to the people of Rotorua. We are just the kaitiaki of it. We are the people who are looking after it for this next term. Somebody else may come next term with a different opinion. So therefore, I recommend that we reconsider this particular motion in light of what the future needs of this community could be and being more specific about it rather than this rather open to interpretation clause. So I cannot support this.
Thank you. Are there any further councillors who wish to provide comment? Councillor Keriopa.
Thank you. I'll just put on the table that my concern is the pressure on council from central government to intensify housing in Rotorua, and council looking at selling off our precious green spaces for housing, which has, as we know, happened in the past. I'm not a golfer, my whānau do not play golf, and when the Springfield Golf Course first hit the headlines, my initial thoughts were, yeah, get rid of it, it only serves rich old people. I was wrong. I was asked 3 times to go visit the Springfield Golf Course. I reluctantly accepted on the 3rd request, and it was obvious for me within the first hour, the benefits of that space for a huge range of people within our community, and it changed my mind. I support Councillor Patterson's, what he's just said, about that the alternative uses need to be specified. I'm only supportive of alternative uses that keep that green space with precious mature trees, which is not only of benefit for our community but for our birds, for biodiversity, for our for our wildlife, which is why I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For me, I love the top line, that we are negotiating an offer of 33 years lease. But for me, I do not like a 3-year, it's just too short. It's at the discussions we had earlier on, it said we're going to give the golf club certainty. But as soon as you tell them 3 years, that's not certainty. And I've expressed this over the years. I had real concerns the Utahina stream down to Ohinumutu, and I've listened to our senior engineer, Stavros, explain over many times, but I've even heard it this morning that he's confirmed it is not on the radar, that other things are being looked at further down the stream. To me, that gives me a bit of comfort. And I think Councillor Patterson has raised various things and that on the alternatives, and I tend to agree with him on that. I personally am not a golfer, not that I didn't want to be, but just never got around to it. But there are a lot of people in Rotorua that do enjoy, and we do have a good golf course up there. So my biggest concern is really the negotiations that are happening at the moment with the 3 to 10. If it had been something like 10 by 10 by 10, gosh, that would have been, that, I'm sure that would have given them certainty, but for me, I can't support the motion that's up here. And for us, what concerns me also is I can see this heading into next year as being one of the elections again, issues again. And I thought we'd moved on from last time. Nor did I. Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion here.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. And just for the record, Stavros is not actually here today, so he has not been able to confirm what you've stated. So, yeah, he's not here. So I'm sure he might have a view on that. So just for the record, he didn't confirm anything. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. First of all, may I thank you for your the appreciation and flexibility today. It may not quite have gone how you wanted it to, but I think it's been important that we've all been able to address, sometimes perhaps in very minute detail, but I think it's important that councillors make as greater informed decision as they possibly can. I come from a slightly different point to some other councillors. I've always committed that I wanted to support Springfield, so long as it was in a place that it could be operational and contribute to the community. On the other hand, I also wanted to progress the situation that we've got in front of us forward for actually, at the end of the day, the club to decide, not us. This is for the actual club and its members to make determinations on. Unfortunately, the mover of the motion declined any movement for us to look at altering the motion, the timeframes, and those are my main concerns around how to break down things like the alternative use, and whether that ends up. I was disappointed in the way the word predetermination has been weaponised across the board. I don't think it's contributed to the point where we can keep this on the matters at hand, which is, i.e., a negotiation of a lease between the club and council. Frankly, I have no problem with the comments that were attributed to yourself and Councillor Kaifong at a previous council meeting. I think all councillors should look at both sides of whether they stand on a platform or not. You should always look at different arguments. Unfortunately, as much as I had wanted to progress this today, the timeframes concern of stated mean that I unfortunately will not be able to support this particular motion. However, I would be open to either the alternative use clause being either removed or extended, even if at the expense of the actual 33-year part being reduced. I personally don't like the idea of tying future councils into a no negotiation. I didn't like it when previous councils have done that to us, and I think that future councils and councillors who are accountable to their own people and take the consequences at elections should always have the benefit of being able to make the best decisions in their judgment based on their values. So for me, unfortunately, I cannot support this, but I did certainly want to move this forward if that's possible today. So thank you very much. And thank you again for your very flexible movements today. Thank you.
Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te manukura o te rā tātou katoa. Well, I'm going to go the other way. Why? I mean, just that first line, to commence negotiations. I've been in plenty of negotiations with leases, to do with leases, long-term leases, short-term leases, all sorts of leases. And this is a very normal start to the kōrero. It's a negotiation. I've heard the kōrero around the, you've got to actually go to the table with something in order to negotiate something. The alternative use clause, now I would imagine that the golf club itself might have something to say about that. And so they should. But that's the point of having a negotiation. I mean, and then I would expect that that kōrero would come back to us, and our chief executive would then lay in front of us what has been said, what has been agreed to, what hasn't been agreed to, and where we go to from there. I think we're making it a lot more complicated than it has to be. I really want to get moving on this because, we started 9:30 this morning. We're still on it. This is crazy. So, I'd like to think that, we'd be progressive. And I've heard the arguments, and there is merit in what everyone's saying. But what I'm saying is if we don't start something, then nothing will start anyway. So the negotiation, and that's what gives me comfort. The 3 to 10 years, of course, I have to agree with Councillor Maxwell on there. 3 years, no way they're going to go there. Of course they're not going to go there. But that's the scope that we're giving our chief executive to work within. 3 to 10 years. I'd like to think that we'd end up at the further end of the 10 years. So, that's good. And 33 years. We're already putting 33 years on the table. I think that's a really good start. And I mean, we talked about the history, been there 75 years. I could talk about the history before that. I could talk about how that ended up as a reserve. I could do that right now, but I won't, because that's not the kaupapa in front of us. So, look, I'm going to support it, and I think the kōrero that comes back to us will then be the point where we have another kōrero about this and move forward. So, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Councillor Waru. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think firstly, I'd just like to, kind of like what Councillor Maxwell mentioned, point out that first line that we're directing the Chief Executive. So there's a direction for the Chief Executive to commence the negotiations. It's not the final decision, as it's very clearly put up there in the motion. The final lease is to be approved by council at a subsequent date, and so I think that's a really clear direction that we're giving. That with those terms, that we direct the chief executive to commence those negotiations, and I think it's really important that we do maintain that flexibility as well. And so having that 3 to 10 years. I think gives the chief executive direction, but also still at the same time offers that flexibility for both parties going into this. And I guess following on from that, what's really important for I think for me is the importance of letting this process run its course. By directing the chief executive to commence these negotiations, us as governors should not be influencing, should not be involved in this process at all, let alone us as the governors of this organisation being involved with the other party. And I think it's a very important thing for us to maintain our integrity, but also to be practicing good governance. And I think that is a really clear thing for us to do, is to not meddle in this process for either party in either direction. I think what has been really disappointing for my perspective is that council has come to the table to negotiate to extend the lease of the golf course, and I don't know. We've had all these conversations around all these other potential uses. Certain words have been thrown around that I haven't personally heard it raised at this council. I don't think there are certain projects that I don't think are priorities of this council. It's very clearly mentioned. It's not in our LTP, but I think what has mentioned before, that that this is a shared concern, that there are 100 other properties surrounding the golf course that also have a shared concern around this, and I don't argue against that, but those 100 other people aren't sitting around the table making the decision. We are put here by our community to make these decisions, and I'm making the decision. We are put here by our community to make these decisions, and I do not want for us to be locking in an extremely valuable piece of land for 33 years with no pull-out clause. That is why I am going to be supporting this. I do not support any clause that is going to lock up this piece of land for 33 years with no alternative use clause. That is not good governance. That is not good decision making. We've heard before that that we are stewards of these resources. We are the kaitiaki of these resources. That is even more argument that we need these flexibilities in place so that future councils and communities can make that decision with their environments, with their situations, and they are empowered to make their own decisions. We hear all the time it's the previous council or previous councils have committed us to this or locked us into that. Wouldn't that be the case if we were to lock our council into a decision that would be going that far? And so I think that alternative use
Point of order, Madam Chair.
What's your point of order?
My point of order is language. I take offence to the word meddling. How dare you?
Did I mention any particular names?
Yeah, Councillor Patterson, I'm not sure why you're so offended by this, but...
I share Councillor Patterson's concern, if I may raise the point of order in support.
Sorry, do you have a point of order as well?
I do. Misrepresentation of the role of governance. The actual purpose of the Local Government Act is to enable democratic decision-making.
Sorry, that's not a point of order. Councillor Wang has correctly described what good governance is, so we will let him finish.
And?
Do you have another point of order?
I'm finishing off my point of order.
Sorry, it's not correct. There has not been misrepresentation on the issue that you are concerned about.
I haven't expressed my concern.
We will let Councillor Wang finish. And Councillor Wang, you are very near 5 minutes.
Yes,
We'd just like to wrap up. Thank you.
Just to wrap up, I am comfortable with this. It offers the flexibility for both sides while also offering the security and confidence that we are looking to extend the lease and offering both the current council community and the golf club and future entities the flexibility to do as they see fit. Also bearing in mind the need for the community consultation on this. And so with that, I'm happy to be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to speak in support of this, and if other councillors remaining wish to speak, then they can or not, up to them. I just want to first of all address the concern around the alternative use clause. Alternative use clauses are very common in other golf course leases that we have seen around the country, including the lease terms that are before us. In fact, in many other golf leases, the rental that is provided is actually substantially more, given the size of the parcel of land that it is usually on. I do want to acknowledge that this is on public reserve. It is a right of the public to have access to that reserve. While I do support a 33-year lease, I am extremely concerned about the already known fact that there is a flood risk for any homes around the Utuhina River and also Ohinemotu. As a founding village of this district, we have a right to protect the villages of Ohinemotu, and we also have a right, first and foremost, in our role as elected members, to protect the health and safety of people and, of course, of property. So while there is not any certainty on alternative use, that is the only thing that I can see in the immediate future that it may be required for. And as I have already mentioned, that is able to be mitigated without disrupting the use of the golf course. And I have also taken the opportunity to visit the golf course myself with club members and also Stavros, our Director of Infrastructure and Environment, who explained what a detention dam might look like. It would not be disruptive, and at worst case scenario, it would hold water for only a day, if that. And so I do not think that the alarm that is being caused in the community about an alternative use clause is warranted. It is actually us ensuring that we are providing well-informed decisions, but also providing alternatives so that other residents in Rotorua are not impacted. Through our long-term plan, we also had many other sports codes turn up to us and express their urgent need for additional sports facilities and fields. We've had soccer before us. We know the issues that are occurring for rugby league, with them having to park all over on a main road on a state highway and the safety concerns from that. We have athletics clubs that are at capacity. We have basketball courts that are required. We have a number of sporting codes in this community that require additional resources. So it is very surprising to me that we have been supportive to offer this for a 33-year lease, but some people would like to explore alternative clauses, because we are trying to put on the table certainty that despite that need in other sports codes, we are happy to support that golf club can remain the same while we find alternative spaces elsewhere, like the solution that we have proposed in Titoki Place for additional sports fields. But if in the next 33 years or sooner, if it is required, some future council is able to meet that future capacity. Because if we are at capacity with sports fields and our reserves and potentially needing stormwater, then it only makes sense for us to ensure that that strategic asset, as has been mentioned by others, is available for us. Because we've also heard from Thomas today that it would cost in the tens of millions, if not more, for us to have to acquire other public land, which, let me be clear, if we needed to put a stormwater detention dam elsewhere when Pukehangi homes come up, we would have to buy homes from other people just to clear it and make it a reserve. So I want to express, what's your point of order?
In actual fact, there is land on Hunt's Farm that the council could purchase. It wouldn't have to be purchasing properties at all.
Sorry, so that's not a point of order, but it actually backs up my point that private land would have to be acquired at the expense of council. So I'm just reiterating why I am comfortable for the alternative use clause to remain, because of the urgent environmental and also social and recreational needs that will very likely come into play in the future. It also allows the golf course, if needed, for them to be able to exit within the 33 years. Because if we lock them in for 33 years, we're locking them in to having to pay at least for 33 years. So I just want to signal that that also is a consideration that you need to take on board. But finally, I do want to say that I'm very supportive of this because, as has already been mentioned, it's not the final decision, but it does allow us to get on with it and for the Chief Executive to be able to go back to the golf club and actually negotiate this final lease. I'm supportive of this one because it is open between the 3 and 10 years, which is quite flexible for the Chief Executive. So I know the Springfield community has been desperate for the certainty of what will happen with that golf course. I have in the past stated that I am supportive of this being a golf course and remaining the same, and I am very happy to be able to support a motion that aligns with the commitments that I have made in statements in the past, and also my ongoing commitment to protect green spaces as reserves. As has rightly been put, the first council meeting of this council, we did save reserves from housing. So I will be supporting this motion. I now ask if there are any final people that wish to speak. Otherwise, we will put this to the vote. Okay, there appear to be no others, so I will now give the mover, Councillor Kai Fong, the right of reply, and we will put this to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to go back to my original wording. Direct the Chief Executive to commence negotiations. And so that is to commence the negotiations with some parameters to start the negotiations. It doesn't mean he has to finish there. So those councillors that are concerned about the term being too short, that's up to the Chief Executive to go with an opening offer. That's for him to negotiate and for him to finally land on what is something that he thinks that he can live with, we can live with, and the golf course can live with, and then it comes back to us for final confirmation of the lease. So I think we should just allow the flexibility for the Chief Executive to actually have those negotiations away from the council table, away from the glare of the public. It is something that is for the Chief Executive and the Executive of the golf club to have in discussion. What we're trying to do here is to actually provide certainty to the golf course. So we're offering a 33-year lease. What has been suggested by other councillors actually provides no certainty. So if councillors want to go to the public with a list of alternatives, which we ask the Chief Executive to write up, that list could contain any number of things. And there could be any number of submissions from the public who might say, well, actually, we're not those people that play golf. We're not those people that necessarily want to just have a golf course. They could be the people that the Mayor's referred to, like the soccer players, the rugby league players, the athletes, the people that want housing. It might be the people that don't want their homes to be flooded. So I think we just need to be careful what we actually wish for if we start meddling in this decision where we're trying to offer the certainty by giving them a 33-year lease. Councillor Lee referred to an 8-year grace period. Well, that's with it. Their flexibility is there within the 3 to 10 years. The other risk that the golf course potentially faces if it listens to some of the councillors who have said, it's a big risk to go to the electee. So if councillors want to go to the public with a list of alternatives, which we ask the Chief Executive to write up, that list could contain any number of things. And there could be any number of submissions from the public who might say, well, actually, we're not those people that play golf. We're not those people that necessarily want to just have a golf course. They could be the people that the Mayor's referred to, like the soccer players, the rugby league players, the athletes, the people that want housing. It might be the people that don't want their homes to be flooded. So I think we just need to be careful what we actually wish for if we start meddling in this decision where we're trying to offer the certainty by giving them a 33-year lease. Councillor Lee referred to an 8-year grace period. Well, that's with it. Their flexibility is there within the 3 to 10 years. The other risk that the golf course potentially faces if it listens to some of the councillors who have said that we should reject this is that there is no lease on the table. It's a big risk to go to the election and say, we think some other councillors might come along and they might vote differently. You might end up at 2027 with no lease, and then where does that leave the golf course? So what we're trying to do is ensure that they have that certainty before we go into the next election. They'll know effectively if this negotiation is concluded quickly, that they've got a 33-year lease, they'll know what the terms are and they'll have that certainty to do the investment that they want to in that golf course. We don't need to discuss the options around housing or stormwater or anything else like that, but if we did, I would want the Chief Executive and the staff to come back with full detailed reports, cost-benefit analysis, pros and cons, costs, timeframes, all those other things, because we shouldn't be making any decision without having that full information before us. So I think that if we don't make this decision today, there is a huge risk that we open a bigger can of worms for the Springfield Golf Club, that they don't get what they want. The councillors that do want the golf course lease renewed, you're making it a bigger risk for the council if everyone has to come out and has their opportunity to say, I want that golf course for something else. Because I'm sure that there will be people that will come out and say, tying up $30 million worth of land for 33 years at $15,000 a year for rental is not necessarily a good deal for the citizens of Rotorua. So I think that allow the Chief Executive the flexibility. It's a starting negotiating point. It may well be something else comes back to the table. We've still got that opportunity to discuss and debate, but let's not get in the way of just letting that negotiation take place. So I'd urge councillors to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kai Fong. We will now put this to the vote. I'll ask that you please raise your hand and we will take a moment to be able to record that to check what the vote is. So it is already on the table. I've read it out. That's moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by myself. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? That is lost. I'll just check whether this will be the appropriate time for the amendment.
I'd be happy to move an amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Kiriopa has already foreshadowed. Councillor Kiriopa, you've signalled the amendment, so I'll ask, we will have some issue with that, unfortunately, but we can discuss that soon. So I'll ask if you'd like to just read out and the staff can type down what your amendment was. Sorry, the motion, what you signalled before that you wish to. Sorry, we were advised prior to this what would happen if it was lost, but now just ask staff to advise us once more.
Through you, thank you, Your Worship. So as it stands, the motion has been lost. Effectively, that means that the Chief Executive has nowhere to go here and no direction from the Council to undertake any further negotiations. So as it stands, in the absence of direction, the lease would continue as is till 2027 and would expire. So I guess...
Sorry, my understanding is the direction given to the previous Chief Executive to continue negotiations still stands, just that I don't have any parameters? Or?
Obviously, the elected members can move an alternate motion at this point to provide fresh directions to the Chief Executive.
So, sorry, we couldn't quite hear you, but if you just hold 1 minute, please. Look, elected members, I want to make sure that we get this right, so I'll just, we're hearing 10 around the room, or just take a suggestion we take a quick 10-minute break while we confirm what the best way forward is now. Thank you very much, everyone. We will recommence our council meeting. Just for those live streaming, we have had the previous motion put failed, so we now have opened up the floor for what a next motion will be. We've had a brief discussion on what could be possible. Councillor O'Brien, did you have the suggestion?
Thank you, Te Manakura. Given that the motion has been defeated, I remind that on the previous report there was 2 options and the motion was based on option 1, and what I would like, and I'm happy to move, is that option 2 be introduced, and I'd also be open to other councillors any amendments, but I'll be happy to move it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Madam.
Just a question of clarification, Your Worship. So Councillor Kiriopa proposed a foreshadowed motion amendment.
I'm happy to withdraw that in support of Councillor O'Brien's motion.
Thank you. Just confirming that that was the case.
Thank you for checking that process, and thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. I'm happy to second Councillor O'Brien's recommendation of option 2.
And
so
I
that
would
we can
signal that I would move an amendment to option 2.
What's your amendment?
To remove the second part of option 2, which states the inclusion of an alternative use clause in the lease, but that alternative clause does not come into effect till after the first 10-year term. So I would be moving an amendment to remove that portion of option 2.
Sorry, I'll just get staff to advise you on why that's unfortunately not possible.
Through you, thank you, Your Worship. The amendment as suggested is actually a direct negative to that. You can't take something out of the motion that has been tabled for discussion. There is a mover and a seconder with those clauses. So it's as seen as a direct negative.
Just vote it down.
Thank you for the suggestion. So we have had plenty of discussion on this. Are there any final questions? Councillor Brown, Patterson and then Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wonder if we could get an opinion from staff whether there's any fishhooks perhaps I'm not seeing in what this is, what this might mean for us.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'm just trying to react to it. I would note that this motion is a motion to approve rather than commence negotiations. And I guess I might need some work to confirm that this does not trigger our significance in engagement policy. So I'm not 100% confident that I can actually do as instructed, provided without perhaps coming back to council and advising on what the implications are.
Just check if there's any other staff. Might just get Thomas, who has been involved in this as well, to provide some comment.
No, there are no fish hooks, as the councillor asked. What this does do is it does provide certainty for the golf course, but also giving future councils the options to consider alternative uses. So, as it is worded in the report, staff with the maybe are comfortable with it.
Thank you. Good question. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your indulgence. I would like to move an amendment to this, which I don't believe is in direct negative, but I stand to be corrected. I take the point of what the Chief Executive just stated, and I would like to see that the following addition goes at the beginning of this, that Council direct the Chief Executive to commence negotiations to offer a term lease of 10 years plus 2 rights of renewal to be agreed by both parties for a total lease period of 30 years on the following terms and conditions: inclusion of an alternative use clause, but that clause does not come into effect until after the first 10 years, and if that use clause is not activated, that moves to the next 10 years and so on, and that the new lease does not commence until 2027.
That was pretty much what we voted down just before. You have requested an amendment though, so sorry, it was quite detailed, so what I might ask you to do is if you could just pop over to Debbie here and we'll get that typed up. Oh, sorry, just check. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Is there?
Can we have it typed up first?
Sorry, yeah, we'll type it up. Apologies, we'll type it up first.
Point of clarification on the process, Madam Chair. Assuming this option gets voted down, like option 1 did, the elected members should be able to craft their own option. Of course. We don't. This is we're not dependent on if the staff have run out of recommendations, and what we are minded to do as a collective is to, for example, approve a lease or direct the Chief Executive to not have a guillotine clause in it, which seems to be offensive to some at the table here, and the reason why the previous motion was voted down. What's going on here?
Councillor Lee, not sure that contributed anything. Actually, we'll just wait for the
I'm
amendment
seeking
to
a
be typed up.
clarification on the process. So, assuming this option is...
Councillor Lee, elected members do not just make up motions. It is a requirement for a staff report to make sure that we have all of the information that we need, including financial risks, significance in terms of engagement with the community if required. We cannot just make up motions. That would be entirely inappropriate without doing due diligence. Sorry, Councillor Waru, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, probably directed, might be at our Chief Executive. I find that second option quite contradictory in terms of having rights of renewal, but then also having it, at 10 years, that's after 10 years, the first term, we are able to initiate or trigger that alternative use clause, but then to also have a right of renewal, 2 rights of renewal in there, sort of. I guess I'm asking, can you give me some clarity around how that would work in practical terms? Because from my point of view, it doesn't sort of match up.
Councillor, or I might wait until the text is up on the screen and then provide some comment, because I think there's now been a motion and an amendment to the motion, and they might need to provide some commentary on how I see both of them working.
If I could just provide, well, while we're waiting, why I'm asking, we say we get to 10 years, the alternative use clause is then is triggered for one reason or another, whatever it is. The argument could be, well, hang on, I've just signed up for a renewal of another 10 years.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. So if I understand your question correctly, is what takes priority, the renewal of the lease or the alternative use clause? The advice that I've received is, provided that the alternative use clause is agreed to by both parties and part of the original agreement, then a renewal would also have that clause and therefore would be binding on both parties as well.
Thank you for that.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, I seek some clarification here. Are you trying to suggest that it's not within the powers of the elected members to direct the Chief Executive to negotiate a lease without the guillotine clause? Is that your interpretation?
Those are not my words, Councillor Lee. Your comments are not contributing at all to this discussion.
Well, I need to understand what your ruling is, because it's not obvious to me, I'm afraid.
It's not a ruling, Councillor Lee. Just...
Sorry, could Councillor Kai Fong shed some illumination if the Mayor's not going to? You seem to be nodding in agreement.
Excuse me, Councillor Lee. We are in a formal meeting, and while we are waiting for this amendment to be put up, we do not talk across the table. It's through the chair, please. Councillor Waru?
Kia ora, if you indulge me te manukura, may I ask another question with regards to this kaupapa?
Okay, is it regards to the amendment? Because we're just about to put it up to see.
Not so much to the amendment. It is really to the point of value, rental, what we would be getting back, what is our return. I do have an issue around that. If it goes for this long, there has to be some way that can be renegotiated. $15,000 a year, I know it's a reserve, but that's just, it makes no sense whatsoever to me to have it at that level. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. So I believe your query is related to the figure that you saw in the original paper. I'd just like to remind councillors that figure was related to the original conditions, which were 3 years. As in my discussions with the golf club, is that the longer that period is fixed, the higher the value is, the independent valuer's assessment of that lease value is. The motion that was previously on the table and was defeated allowed me to have a negotiation with the golf club around where they saw the point of certainty against affordability. And with that in mind, my intention was to discuss and come to some agreement, mutual agreement with the golf club. So I'm waiting to see what this motion says, but you are correct that a fixed 10-year term is going to have a higher rental charge than something that's fixed for less time than that.
No.
Thank you for that.
Okay, councillors, I will read this out for everybody's information and for those who may be live streaming. So the new motion before us is that council direct the chief executive, sorry, Councillor Lee, it's a bit distracting if you're talking, that council direct the chief executive to commence negotiations to offer a lease for a term of 10 years plus 2 rights of renewal to be agreed by both parties for a total lease period of 30 years on the following terms and conditions. Inclusion of an alternative use clause in the lease, but that the alternative lease clause does not come into effect until after the first 10-year term. That if the alternative use clause is not invoked, that progresses to the next 10 years. That the new lease does not come into effect until the expiration of the existing lease in 2027. That the mutually agreed lease come back to council for final approval. We'll now ask the chief executive to provide some comments, bearing in mind we've only just put this on the table, and then we'll open up for any questions on the new motion, and then any discussion, and then put this to the vote. hopefully we have done that all by 1 o'clock, please, people.
Thank you, Worship. So, initial reading of it, my reaction, Your Worship, is that I would request the opportunity to bring a paper back to Council on the implications of this. This does, given that we're in 2024 now, and this would commence in 2027, it's a 13-year fixed term, and then the opportunities for future councils to activate an alternative use clause are restricted. So I might ask councillors if you'd allow me to bring a paper back so that staff can consider the implications and give you a complete and comprehensive advice on the implications of the motion as currently drafted. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is very fair and reasonable, given the significance of this to the council, to the golf course, to the public. So I will ask the mover, Councillor Patterson, and the seconder, Councillor Kiriopa, if... oh, hang on, just a... Sorry, would you both be comfortable with this matter lying on the table until the... Just checking. To the...
Hang on. Can I make a suggestion?
Sorry, that it lie on the table until the next council meeting, at which time our staff would be able to seek any additional information and basically everything Andrew just said. Is that okay with you both? Okay. I'll just get confirmation from the room as well.
Madam Chair, could I make a suggestion, please?
Yes.
If we're going to direct the Chief Executive to come back to us with a report, that's fine. There are probably several issues that he could comprehensively cover a range of issues in his report. So it would make sense to not return to us with a limited report, but rather a wide-ranging report. That would enable us to consider all options.
We've just had a quick think about where we're at the moment, understanding that I think it's in everyone's best interest that we are progressing this as quickly as possible. So there has just been a suggestion, and I'll get the Chief Executive to explain it, which might be helpful for progressing, so we're not just waiting another month. We can still have some work being done behind the scenes. Andrew, if you'd like to just overview that.
Thank you, Worship. Responding to some of the comments, if I understand correctly, the intention is for Council to direct the Chief Executive to report back to Council on all of what's up there, and if that's actually voted on and there's a direction passed, then it means that you've actually given me a direction rather than leaving it on the table, which leaving it on the table means that I don't have a formal direction. So if the mover and the seconder would like to adjust that, perhaps.
So the request and the advice on the best solution moving forward is, instead of myself as the chair ruling that we lie this on the table until the next meeting, that if the mover and the seconder were comfortable just in that first line, that we direct Chief Executive to commence negotiations, that we direct the Chief Executive to prepare a report offering a lease. Oh, is that correct? That should cover it. Yeah. So it still achieves the same thing. It will still come back to the next council, but it allows the Chief Executive to do additional work for us. I'm getting quite a few nods around the table.
Yes, I have a couple of refinements to that, but in general, yes.
Okay, well, the mover and seconder are okay with that. So we now open up for questions on the motion before us with that update. Right. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. As part of that report, would it be reasonable to seek the golf course feedback on this proposal? Nod? No, I'm happy to take a nod.
Well, yeah, that would be quite
So
different
the
from
Chief
what we're
Executive
doing.
has confirmed that, yes. Councillor, do you have a question?
I have a question. Can we have an option prepared for us that does not include an alternative use clause, and you can provide your advice to us about that?
It's not the direction within the motion, but we...
Your Worship, in order to provide Council with all of the options under the Local Government Act, that would be something I would be covering in my advice in the paper anyway. So, thank you.
Could I also suggest that you investigate a clause in the lease agreement that would deal with flood mitigation? And I would suggest a clause could deal with that on the basis of the club agreeing to close a couple of holes.
Sorry, Councillor, it's very hard to understand you. Can you just move your mic forward and speak clearly?
Sure. A clause in the lease agreement should be able to be constructed which addresses flood mitigation possibilities for the future of the golf course. So it doesn't require a alternative use clause if the golf course is going to remain open. I think the golf club would be happy with 2 holes being closed at a time while council renovated the golf course, if that was what it wanted to do. But that's able to be handled as a specific clause.
I think that's a level of detail that the Chief Executive can have those discussions with the golf course. Councillor Wang, sorry, did you have a question earlier? Look, I'm very mindful we've spent a considerable amount of time on this. I've got a lot of nods around the table for this. So what I'd like to do is to put it to the vote, allow the Chief Executive, if it's supported, to prepare that report, and at the next council meeting we will have the opportunity for questions. We can read the report and provide any final comments then.
We need to get that up on the motion.
Councillor
these
Waru.
issues.
Kia ora, te manukura, just quick. So, you prepare a report, and those other points below also stay as is? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, for it to come back. So it will come back to what the Chief Executive is going to do is we're not making a decision on what's here, but we are instructing the Chief Executive that he'll do a report based on what is recommended above.
So just for example, sorry if you would indulge me, te manukura, say the last point there, that the new lease does not come into effect until the expiration of the existing lease in 2027. In the paper, there will be the impacts of that. Is that how I see it? Okay.
That is
correct. Thank you.
Can we draft a motion to that effect so that we all know what we're voting on?
We're not voting.
We've got everything that we need there, Councillor Lee. The intent of that is there. We've had confirmation from the Chief Executive. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to clarify that the Chief Executive is going to include alternative use if we take it out, what the implications of that would be. So we'll have that as part of that report. Is that what you said before?
Yes, that needs to be reflected.
I'm happy to clarify again, and I appreciate it. It's been a long meeting. What I'm taking away from this is that I will bring a paper back to council with a number of options. The primary option I've been asked to explore is what's in front of you. I will be speaking to the golf club about that. I will be getting advice from staff in how this particular option impacts a range of our policies, and I'll be also proposing some alternatives to this option and the implications of it there. The granularity of what's going to be covered in that report I can't really speak to at this point, and so I'd request that perhaps if that's the general agreement of the direction, that perhaps you'll wait until we see the paper and have further discussion at that point.
Thank you. So, and we'd have that about a week prior, like any normal paper, so we can ask questions. Great. Thank you.
Sorry, if we're going to have an option that does not include the alternative lease clause, it needs to be included in the motion and spelt out.
As part of a report back, as we have received in the previous, you are given a number of options to consider. That is part of usual process. Yep. Yes. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I just ask, is the Chief Executive happy where it says following terms and conditions that the report can also include things like the rental differential? Is he happy with how the wording as proposed allows him to include that? And also the second question is, are we talking about next month's meeting or the following month, just to try and give staff a breather?
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Through you, Your Worship. The financial implications of all options are standard items on all papers, so you will see the financial impacts of all the options, including the rental cost, the rental charge, as part of the options paper. And I do take your point about whether 1 month is sufficient for me to explore all of these alternative options. It's likely to be not the next one, but perhaps after that.
Yeah, and so just also want to signal that, of course, the golf club themselves may require more time. So we will aim for this report coming back as soon as possible, which would be next, but we'll see how those negotiations play out. Okay, so that appears to be all the questions. We're going to just put this to the vote as we've had plenty of discussion. I won't read it out again. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Kiriopa. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? That is carried. Sorry, were you against as well?
I'm against it because it's not reflecting what's been said. We have asked for a report that includes
You've noted that you were against
the alternative options clause not being there.
Order, please, Councillor Lee. Order. Yeah. So we will now move to our next item. We got past the first item. So we are now we're going to return back to the start of our agenda, and we are discussing our remits to local government New Zealand. So I'm happy to move this. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Waru. So just to receive the report, this report. Item 1. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. So that's been received, and we will now open up for questions and discussion. What I suggest we do, so you've got the attachment to your RGNZ remits in your Stella, is that we'll take them one by one. There are 8 remits before us, and I will first get Una to overview it first, but we'll take it one by one and then get council support or not support or a vote of abstaining on each. So I'd now like to invite Una, if she wishes to cover the remits and overview this report.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I think the Chair has covered off everything here. These remits come forward from the sector. They do require support to even sort of get to this stage of LGNZ putting these onto their agenda, and they are discussed at the Local Government New Zealand conference at their AGM. In bringing them before yourselves, it's an opportunity for yourselves to show to your delegates, who is the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor at that AGM, for what the council, in terms of each remit, is it their support or not, and that provides the Mayor with the voting rights at that meeting to vote accordingly. So as the Mayor has outlined, we'll take each of the remits one by one.
Thank you. So we will start with the first remit, the representation review. I am happy to move this. I'm happy to move to support this. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wang. Just quick overview. This remit is, quote, that LGNZ advocate for changes that support the provision of timely and accurate regional and sub-regional population data to councils for use in council representation reviews. We don't have questions because these are not our reports, sorry. So we will just open up if there's any discussion. And I might just ask, in the interest of time, if there's any discussion against this. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not a fan of LGNZ, and I don't have enough information in front of me to support any of these. I would, if it was my choice, I'd follow suit from Greymouth Council and Christchurch Council and Auckland Council and leave LGNZ.
Okay. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Just in report, to the attachments that came through in Stella, where it had a background from LG and Z, in terms of time, I'll cut this down. The remit is flexible enough to enable advocacy that takes into account a possible move to a 4-year term. I'm not in favour of that. I know it's only, and it's not really recovered in what they originally put in, but when you read in, I think that there's a lot more to this than what the initial read is. I believe in good government as long as whatever term, whether it's 9 years, 12 years, and a 3-year term is no impediment to that. 4 years with a bad council or government can do an awful lot of damage, as we've seen from, I'll leave that alone. Sorry, I won't be supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Te Manakura. I won't be either, because I believe we should control how we, our community should control, not we, our community should control how we run our city. We have a paper coming up next week on this very issue, so I would rather us take control of our destiny than have it mandated by somebody else.
Okay, just thank you for those comments. Just confirming, the remit in front of us is actually, so this is put forward by Waikato Regional Council. They're asking that LGNZ, and I'll read it again, advocate for changes that support the provision of timely and accurate regional and sub-regional population data for councils to use in council representation reviews. So it's just asking that, making sure, so basically as is explained in the report, the census data can be very old, and so when representation reviews do occur, that data can be up to 6 years old, which, so they're just wanting more timely. But we take your comments on board. You're welcome to still not support if you wish. Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry, Your Worship, and point taken, you're right, we should be on the things in front of us, but can I also remind councillors that we've received a background from LGNZ. It's an attachment in Stella, which I've read, and it actually breaks down some of the very simplistic language into detail about what they're hoping to achieve. So hence, like with the 4-year term, which isn't part of their actual thing, but it states that it's one of the possibilities that they will advocate for. I'd just be wary of and hope that everyone's actually read the attachment that's been sent out. Thank you.
Thank you. There appear to be no further speakers, and just to double clarify, the vote that we're asking for today is what Deputy Kaifong and myself will then take and vote on. So it's not guaranteeing whether this will be supported or not. It's just our vote for Rotorua Council. So there appear to be no further comments. We'll put this to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. We will move on to our next one, Community Services Card. So I will read it very quickly. Okay. Hang on just a second. Oh, yeah, thank you. That LGNZ advocate to central government to amend the Health Entitlement Cards Regulations 1993 so that the card holder can use the Community Services Card as evidence for the purposes of accessing council services which would otherwise rely on a form of means testing. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor. To support it. Seconded by Councillor Kaifong. Any discussion on this matter? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Again, quoting from their service document from LGNZ. Current regulations do not allow councils to ask if a person is a community card service holder in order to establish eligibility for council services. What happens when the alignment between government and councils aren't always the same? And also, if we're going to allow community service cards holders discounts on council services, who's picking up the tab for that and what's going to be the costs on that? So for me, there's too many questions not addressed here, so sorry, I won't be supporting.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No, I put that to the vote to support. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. We now move to the third remit. This was put forward by Palmerston North City Council, that local government constituencies and wards should be subject to referendum. Should not be. Thank you. that LGNZ lobbies central government to ensure that Māori wards and constituencies are treated the same as all other wards and that they should not be subject to a referendum. We oppose the idea that Māori wards should be singled out and forced to suffer a public referendum, quote. Do we have a mover and a seconder for anything? Yep, and what would you like to move? Support. Okay. So that's moved to support by Councillor Kiriopa, seconded by Councillor Brown. Open up for any discussion on this. Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, I do support this, and yeah, at long last, I think it means that Rotorua Lakes Council, we can give a view whether we support this or not. Up to now, it has been there. So for me, I hope to get support from my colleagues. Kia ora.
Thank you. Are there any further comments on this? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess that goes back to my previous comment. To be honest, I would prefer that we controlled, but this is just my opinion, that we controlled our own destiny, and I don't trust others lobbying for what we want because we haven't had a chance to decide that. I think we should have our meeting next week and understand the complications and the consequences going forward of any interference from Wellington and changing what we want for our people, and that we should actually have the right to decide what our people want, or in fact they should. So, yeah, I'm going to abstain from this because I'm not quite sure about this.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā wei te manukura. Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this, obviously. And I just want to make it clear that it's about all wards as well. It's not just, the Māori wards have been mentioned in here. And we're the only ward that has to suffer a public referendum, but there's also, it says, other wards. So we're talking about other rural wards in Aharane. So they should not have to do that, and I think it's a travesty. And to Councillor Patterson's point around, when the government, central government, they always do things. They always have, and I think they always will. And I suppose, from my point of view, any type of lobbying or any type of support that can bring about a change or bring about fairness in any community is a good thing for me. So I fully support this, and as I said, I hope that we get this one through too, because I'm quite passionate about tēnei kaupapa. Kia ora.
Thank you. Sorry, were there any further speakers? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. With all due respect to the points raised by Councillor Waru, I've made my points on all wards, rural, the whole shebang, previously, so I won't carry on about that. I'm against all wards. It should be straight on the general public, whether you're on the Maori electorate or the general. Where the remit falls down for me is that everyone around this table has had an opportunity to submit on the legislation. Legislation goes before committees. Everyone's had an opportunity here to vote. Maybe some of you have taken that opportunity. From memory, I don't think we as a council did, but I stand to be corrected if that's wrong. We've had an opportunity. The government's taking action. If we don't like it, we get to vote them out at the next election or support parties with different views. So, sorry, I cannot support this. It goes against sort of everything I've sort of spoken up about, including governments that I haven't agreed with. So, no, I won't be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just confirm, there was a submission from Rotorua. I open up for any discussion. Okay. Appears to be no discussion. I will do support, not support, abstain. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? And any that abstain? Oh.
Madam Chair, I just want to make a point. It's very, of course, the Māori ward, we're going to vote that way. It'd be silly not to. That's what we stood on.
Yeah. And sorry, I will just ask if we can take that vote one more time. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? And so that is tie. So as the chair, I will then, that abstain, obviously we're abstaining. So as the chair, I have a casting vote for that. The usual rule with the casting vote is that we remain status quo. So I will be against this to remain the status quo of not entrenching the Māori ward seats for local government. Yeah, so that has been lost. So we will move to remit number 5. Graduated driver licensing programs, licensing system. This is from Ashburton District Council. I read out that LGNZ advocate for changes to the fee structure for driver licensing, better preparing young people for driver licence testing and greater testing capacity in key locations throughout New Zealand in order to relieve pressure on the driver licensing system and ensure testing can be conducted in a quick and efficient manner. I would actually like to move that we abstain. I'm happy for that to be lost if so, but my recommendation on abstaining is that it falls outside of the mandate or responsibilities of local government. I think that this is quite squarely a responsibility of the government and also of government agencies. Do I have a seconder to abstain from this vote? Seconded by Councillor Kaifong. Open up for any discussion if there is. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand where you're coming from, but I think the system is broken. I think there are too many barriers for young people to get their licence, and quite often it's the pathway for young people into the criminal justice system because they are not being picked up. They're being picked up for not having a driver's licence. So I actually would support that we advocate for changes to this. I think it would be a positive for the country.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. There appears to be no further discussion, so I'll put it forward for abstain. If that's lost, someone else can suggest a recommendation. So that Council abstain from voting for the proposed graduated driver licensing system remit. All those in favour, raise your hand. Any? 1, 2, 3, 4. Any against? Raise your hand. So that's been lost. Would anybody like to recommend an alternative motion?
I'll support. Yes.
Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Maxwell, that Council support the proposed graduated driver licensing system remit. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. We now move to the next one. Proactive lever to mitigate the deterioration of unoccupied buildings. This is from Gisborne District Council. I read out that Council and that LGNZ advocate to government for legislative change enabling local authorities to compel building owners to remediate unoccupied derelict buildings and sites that have deteriorated to a state where they negatively impact the amenity of the surrounding area, and to increase repurposing vacant buildings to meet region-specific needs, for example, accommodation conversion. I'm happy to move to support this. It's seconded by Councillor Wang. Any discussion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was widely known my opinion on the Golden Glow Motel, and so good to see that being remedied now. There are houses on a major thoroughfare on Devon Street, which has been overgrown for years and is actually dangerous. I'm surprised it hasn't burnt down. I mean, these kind of things are a health and safety issue, let alone an eyesore. And it's land that's not being utilised. It's just, I think this is an important step to sorting that out.
Thank you. There appears to be no other comments, so we have mover and seconder that Council support the proposed proactive lever to mitigate the deterioration of unoccupied buildings remit. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? That is carried.
Your Worship, sorry, could I record my abstain from that one? Thank you.
Of course. We'll get that recorded for you. The next remit, remit number 7, is appropriate funding models for central government initiatives. This comes from Northland Regional Council. That LGNZ proactively promote and lobby for the development of a more equitable and appropriate funding model for central government initiatives. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? It's seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Any discussion on this item? There appeared to be none. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? That is carried. We now move to the final remit, Goods and Services Tax GST Revenue Sharing with Local Government from Northland Regional Council. That LGNZ be proactive in lobbying central government on sharing GST revenue with local government derived from local government rates and service fees related to flood protection, mitigation, roading and three waters for investment in these areas. Moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Wang. Any discussion? Do you want me to read that one more time? That's okay. That LGNZ be proactive in lobbying central government on sharing GST revenue with local government, the goods and services tax, derived from local government rates and service fees related to flood protection, mitigation, roading and three waters for investment in this area. Yep, that's to support. Obviously, Northland Regional Council have had quite a lot of issues with this. They require additional support, as do many of us. Okay, there appear to be no comments on this. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Any against? That is carried. Thank you. So I'll just ask the Chief Executive to provide some closing comments and then we will break for lunch.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thought I'd use this opportunity to discuss with you, councillors, possible items for the next cycle. And one of them, which I'd like to suggest this council might want to consider, is government properties that don't pay rates. So there's quite a significant number of government properties in Rotorua, for example, the hospital, that don't pay rates. And the concept of users pay rates to keep their services going, particularly local government services, it just seems incongruous that it applies to everyone uniformly, businesses, small businesses, individual units, marae, but not to large central government properties. So I know that this was an item that was highlighted in small print in the Future for Local Government review that hasn't been picked up by any of the other councils. I had expected that would be one of the remits, and what I'm seeking here is if you generally support that, then I will make this something that we champion for next year's round of remits, for us to advocate that in the interest of fairness, if individual properties, marae and Auntie Doris has to pay her rates to keep the water running, that hospitals and other large central government properties do the same. So that was my question for you, really, and no formal answer, but good to get some feedback from around the table.
You'd like some feedback now? Thank you. Councillor Brown?
I would support the CEO's direction on that. That makes no sense to me, but I just wonder also whether there's potential for a workshop to uncover any other potential remits that we might like to support in the future as a piece of work.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion. We'll put that down as an action point and make sure that we have adequate time to do that before. I do also apologise. We had a notification from LGNZ quite some time ago to submit the remits. It was quite a long time before it actually gets LGNZ, so it didn't really allow us enough time to prepare these sorts of items. But yes, good suggestion. Thank you on the workshops. Question from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you to Manakura. Just on your comment there, Mr. Moraes, with regards to the current lobbying for GST to be given to us from developments, any developments that are on council land or in our area that's, sorry, no, it's not that, it's on developments that happen within our rohe, we get the GST from that. That's new developments. So would that coincide with that? Could we tie that in, or does that have to be separate?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Look, I'm not sure of the details of the wording of this particular remit and how it would translate, keeping in mind that this is a new concept for central government to share a portion of GST with local government. So in some ways, cognitively, a bigger stretch than just saying, just pay your rates. So on that basis, let's see where this goes. The one I talked about earlier is independent of that and based on a principle that already exists, that people who use services pay their rates for them.
Bye.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Te Manakura. I'd just urge a little bit of caution here because it sounds very good, we'll just get government to pay for hospitals and schools, but these tend to be non-profit entities. Sorry, off the top of my head, they still pay for the amount of perhaps toilets they use or nothing at all, no pan charges? So if you want a school to suddenly start paying, don't be surprised if your fees go up, your school fees double per year or something like that to help pay.
I might just get this, good point, might just get this clarified by Thomas.
Schools do pay service charges. However, there is specific legislation which limits or how we can rate them, so they don't pay the full rates and are generally discounted down. And I think from memory, they do pay approximately 50% of the targeted services rates that a normal activity would pay. But no, they don't pay general rate.
Thank you. So again, someone's going to pick up the tab for that. So instead of it coming out of this side of my wallet, it's going to come out of the other side of my wallet. So just bear that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's enough feedback for our Chief Executive to take on board. So what we're going to do now is we will take our break for lunch. We'll take 1 hour and return at 2:10. So we will see you all then. Thank you. Oh, apologies. Sorry, Councillor Waru.
I just want to say, because I might not be able to come back, because I have to go to the tangi at 10 past, well, by 3 o'clock I have to be out there. So I just want to put my apologies in. But also, while I do have the floor, I'd like to just make a comment that, I'm a little bit perplexed and disappointed at where we landed on the entrenchment of the Māori seats. I've been remiss of me not to say that and be pono with everyone here. It's enough for us to be, we're supposed to be the heart of Māori, kaupapa Māori, ahureo Māori, kaupapa Māori, everything Māori. And I'm really disappointed at that we've landed where we've landed. I would urge everyone here today to have a good think about that moving forward. And that's all I want to say. I'll leave it at that. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. We're adjourned for lunch and we'll see everyone again at 2:10. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai hoki mai ki tēnei hui. Welcome back to this council meeting. We will get back underway where we left off. So we are now at our public forums. After that item, I will then go to the progress reports, and I just recommend that we take those as read for now. So we are on page 29 of our agenda. I ask for a mover and a seconder first to receive this item. It's moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Kiriopa. All those in favour to receive the report public forums, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. So I'd now like to invite Una to overview this report.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, just reminding councillors that on the 26th of June, Council asked that the Chief Executive bring back a paper to this meeting around the inclusion of public forums onto the agenda and some options around process and what needs to be done to provide for that provision. In having a look at public forums, we've had a look at how other councils run their public forums across the country. We've had a couple of conversations with staff as well around it, and that's all outlined in the paper. It does appear that around 85% of councils across the country do have some form of public forum. And if you so choose to have them, it's quite explicitly laid out how they operate and need to be administered under Standing Order number 15. We did a little bit of research back to beyond 2000 to see whether at any time in Rotorua's history have they actually had public forums, and couldn't find anything on the agendas. So if it is introduced, this would be the first instance that Rotorua would have public forums. The uptake, I guess, around public forums also across the country is a bit of a mixed bag, and in the report we've given you a bit of a summary from, I think, 5 or 6 different councils over the last 6 months in terms of how many times forums have been offered versus how many times people have actually shown up or expressed their desire to come in and speak to the council in a public forum. So the paper does not provide a staff recommendation either way. It's entirely a political decision for yourselves. I think I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Una. Obviously, I'm in support of this, given I brought the notice of motion. There's 2 or 3 anomalies in there which the report is actually at variance with the standing orders. In particular, on page 32 of the agenda, at the top under 3.4, number 1, update order of business for council meetings only. Public forums will not take place in committee meetings. The standing orders contemplate that public forums would be available to committees and also to community boards. So what's the story with that?
Through you, Your Worship, I have followed what the resolution to the last council was, and that was to look at adding public forums onto the agenda of council meetings. So my conversation in the report follows that through. If council wished to add them to committee forums as well, to committee meetings as well, it's totally up to you.
Great, thank you for that. Page 34 of the agenda, you've provided a sample public forum application which asks that applicants should complete the form 2 days prior to the meeting, whereas the standing orders give 1 day.
Through you, Your Worship, the standing orders in most instances are a guideline. There will be a little bit of additional administration that will be required in order to put these onto the agenda. Therefore, we have asked, and again, it is a proposal being put forward to yourselves, that we would like a little bit of extra notice if we're going to administer these, and ask that people are able to provide us with 2 days notice that they would like to be heard. We have again looked at that across other councils, and other councils do vary across themselves in terms of how much notice they ask for from people who wish to be attending a public forum.
So if somebody wanted to speak at the public forum, the agenda would have come out the Wednesday before, so it's certainly not going to be added to an agenda, is it, even 2 days in advance?
Through you, Your Worship, if you choose to add public forums, it would be likely that because of the requirement of this council to publish the agenda a week beforehand, every agenda that is published would have to have the title public forums, but I wouldn't be able to confirm to yourselves whether there are actually anybody that is wishing to be at the public forum until people have actually applied to speak at said meeting.
The For what it's worth, the standing orders contemplates that people could potentially just turn up at council meeting, and I understand that's the practice. That would be at the chair's discretion, but that is common at other councils, I believe, that people could just turn up and at the chair's discretion speak to us.
I'd strongly advise against that, but sorry, it was remiss of me not to ask the Chief Executive to provide some comment to this as well, just regarding the public forums in general.
Thank you, Your Worship, and what I have to say probably does touch somewhat on the line of questioning from Councillor Lee. I've consulted with a number of my CE colleagues around the country as well to just understand how it works and what some of the opportunities and challenges are. And I guess the numbers that you've got in front of them are, I would say, to clarify, they are successfully applied public forum attendees. There's quite a number that don't meet the threshold of what the restrictions are and then don't proceed. So I guess I just to add to my initial comments is that there's a question about how much more access they give, because the numbers that access the public forums are not large when considered against the other channels that the public have for approaching council. Related to the number of days notice as well, as I believe standing order says 2 days clear, so 1 day clear, which effectively is 2 days the midday before. So it's a guideline, but council can make a decision on that basis. And in general, yes, it's not common that with any of the CEs that I've spoken to that members of the public turn up without prior approval of the chair. So it's not common practice in my understanding.
Okay, thank you for that. That leads me to the final question. Also on the application form, just at the bottom there's the person applying to speak at the public forum states is asked to sign an acknowledgement that the chairperson has discretion to accept or decline any my request. I suppose that would have to be in reference to the restrictions, but okay. I suppose on reflection I can live with that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Kaifong.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question then around the notice period as well. Just to ensure some consistency with petitions, it's 5 working days, and to be giving notice effectively to a chair and to the staff to quickly potentially go through a number of applications to speak a day or two ahead of a meeting is quite an inordinate task. So just a question around, should there not be consistency around that? It also then ties in with the timing of the agendas being circulated.
Through Your Worship, that certainly makes staff work much more manageable and plannable. Certainly.
And sorry, just another question, which was the paper suggests restrictions on what can be raised at a meeting. So depending on, Councillor Lee's raised the question of should they be not just at council meetings but at committee meetings. And so if there are decisions to be made at a committee or a council meeting, it does say there that they can't speak if it's subject to a hearing. But is it really appropriate to have a public forum where people may come and influence just because you've only got 5 slots or 6 slots, a decision that is coming later on in the day? So would there be a situation where we should say, you've submitted your form, I want to talk about X, we note that X is actually on the agenda that day, so it's not appropriate to discuss it at that point because you're actually effectively making a submission?
Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. And again, there are slight variations in the standing orders adopted by different councils across the country. I have seen some that have that restriction on if a matter is being discussed as a paper, then either the member of the public who wants to participate is invited to speak at that item if appropriate, or not allowed to speak at that public forum for precisely the reasons you mentioned. So there's the opportunity for further clarification of some of these rules should this council make a decision to adopt public forums.
Just one final question, Chair, then. That just comes back to, I'm not sure what other questions other councils might have, but it seems to me that there needs to be more clarity in terms of the policy as to when and where public forums may or may not be allowed, timeframes, exclusions. I had made some comments around, from my perspective, I thought there were a few little sort of typos or corrections in that form. And so the decision that's seeking there and the recommendation is that we simply provide full forums, full stop, but I think that we probably need to have a bit more clarity around the policy and its implications before we actually finally adopt a decision, so that we know what we're adopting when we say we are or are not going out with public forums.
Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. I think I'll take your point around some tidy up and further clarifications to be done. I guess I would suggest that perhaps the fundamental decision is still the same about whether you have them or not, and the details can be ironed out subsequently.
Thank you. I just have a question regarding the time and resource of staff. I've made my view quite clear about public forums, actually, so I do not support them, but I do want to just double check what the additional requirements from staff will be, and whether staff believe that it is manageable to be including public forums, bearing in mind we could have up to 6 different groups coming to present for that 5 minutes, and of course the correspondence that's required could easily be a whole person's full job for that week leading up to it, because as we know with petitions, etc., sometimes people do attempt to submit something that is not relevant, and there is some communication and some assistance that's provided back and forth to enable them to be in a position where they can come and present what is able to be within the council business. So just a question on the resource.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Without having done public forums before, I actually have no evidence to base how much extra time this may take of any staff member. A suggestion could be that if you wish to look at bringing public forums in, that given where we are in the triennium, that from say here on in until the end of the triennium, you could put them in, and then there would be sufficient time between now and the following elections to see how they are being administered, how they are being received, who is coming in, and so we would have a bit of time and a bit of evidence there in terms of how well public forums are being utilised and administered. But at this point in time, I would be guessing to say how much time it's actually going to take my team to be able to administer this.
Through your worship, if I could just add the comment, I'm quite surprised by how much of my time it takes to respond to and address petitions. So if that's any guide, then certainly there would be additional demands on my time. But, as was mentioned earlier, we don't have any evidence because we haven't tried it yet before.
Are there any further questions? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manukura. Thank you very much for your very helpful and very comprehensive report, Una. Could I just ask, do you think there's a risk, because half an hour, especially if we introduce it at some point, especially the first few months, if we get 8 requests and they're all valid, suddenly that's a workload, say if people wanted to go up and we would have to assume they want their 5 minutes. What happens if we end up with a waiting list down the track? How are we going to resolve that so that people Sorry, I know this is a hard question to estimate, but it's like, well, what do we do if...
Sorry, I might answer that because I've actually read this as it's written here. So the standing orders allow for a period of up to 30 minutes, and the intention was if there are multiple speakers, then they share that 30 minutes rather than each get 5 minutes as default. Obviously, this is up to the chair's discretion, but I would expect that the default is not that the time creeps up, but each person, each submitter gets a smaller portion of the 30 minutes.
Sorry, so if we only had, we're setting aside, as proposed, we would set aside 30 minutes for the meeting on public forum. Now, with all greatest of respect, some of our members of the community, or perhaps the organisations they represent, some people could very easily use up that 30 minutes. I won't mention names, but there's people out there, and very valid, I'm sure. But how, if we, particularly at the start of this, we are inundated with requests, how are we going to prioritise, or is it first come in, first served? If multiple people want to talk on the same subject but from different viewpoints, how do we manage that?
So item 15.1 on page 30 of the agenda covers that. It's intended to be 30 minutes in total per council meeting and only 5 minutes per speaker. And if there are more than 6 speakers, then that time is shared. So each submitter would get less than 5 minutes to speak, and the 30 minutes would be divided up among the number of speakers that there would be. And to the point raised earlier, that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to understand how many are coming and process it and manage it, as you rightly pointed out.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll just add to that. Cast your minds back to the hearings. We had our little camera with the countdown of the 5 minutes. I think if we introduce this, we would have to look at a permanent version of the countdown so that speakers are really clear in the understanding that they have a maximum of 5 minutes to talk. If it's a maximum, so even if, say, only one speaker turns up in that 30 minutes, they will only get the 5 minutes, just the same as like for petitions and everything. So.
Sorry, I just have a further question. Hopefully we know the answer. My question is just regarding one of my key concerns around public forums is that public forums are not accessible to everyone. So people who have the ability to come during a workday or a school day between 9:30 and 10 a.m. are in a very privileged position to be able to do so. And I have concerns that those who are in work that is not flexible to their needs, or also in school, that we are not catering to all of the community. Do we have any information or guide on the demographic makeup of the people who are usually presenting in public forums in other areas?
Through your worship, I don't have data, but again, speaking with my CE colleagues around the place, it is as you say, it's people who have the privilege of not having to be somewhere else, so either at school or at work, or to have childcare needs or other such commitments during the times when council meetings are held, and that self-selects in the group of people who tend to appear there. Again, that's anecdotal from other chief executives, but it tallies with other data we have around engagement with council processes.
Thank you, and that also aligns with what I've observed and in discussions that I've had with other councils as well, which just reiterates the concern that I have, which is that we already have multiple ways for our public to be able to contact us, and that this may not be accessible and only allowing this privilege to some. But we'll carry on. If there are any final questions, then we'll open up for discussion. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and my sincere apologies for my tardiness. I don't know why, but I had 2:30 in my head, so I do apologise for that. Just my one question, just carrying on from the topic you've just raised. Would it be possible for people to nominate someone to speak on their behalf if they could not attend personally?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So there is, again, I've seen that in other parts of the country, and I have some information on councils that have deputations, which would allow a person to speak on behalf of another person or an organisation. Again, I can add that to the consideration, and perhaps that leads towards the questioning of Councillor Kai Fong earlier, whether we bring back something with those issues addressed as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open up for discussion. We also have Councillor Waru joining us by Zoom now. Please let us know if you wish to make any points. Is there any discussion on this item? Sorry, we do need to have something to move. Would you like to?
I'd be happy to move a slight variation of 2A to update the order of business, and also for that to apply to all council meetings.
Did you hear him, Councillor? It's for all council meetings, council and committees.
Yes, 2A.
But he also wants it
not
to
just
be
council meetings, but
council, infrastructure, environment
committee meetings,
community
rural,
and district development,
yep.
audit and risk, all committees of council. So currently,
infrastructure and environment, community and district development.
And it would also include audit and risk as a committee of council.
Don't know who would turn up for that one.
Yeah, sorry. So what originally is up is for council meetings only, but we have had it moved with the addition of all, whatever he said. Is there any seconder for that? No, sorry, that has not been seconded.
No, I think.
No, he's withdrawn based on
Councillor Maxwell's a little unclear here.
Only.
Right.
Okay, so do we have a mover and a seconder for A or B? Councillor Patterson.
I would like to move A.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Maxwell. So we now have update the order of business for council meetings to include public forums following the guidelines set out in Standing Order 15. We are now open for any discussion. Would you like to start as the mover, or?
Thank you, Worship. I've long wondered why we didn't have public forums, and now this is the opportunity for us to become more contactable and have more communication with our community. And public forums are a way that is not so daunting as organising a petition, or it's just a little bit more friendly, even though it will be formal and they will be appearing before us and they will have behaviours to adhere to and they will have forms that they have to fill out. But it's nowhere near as difficult as organising a petition just to have a kōrero with us. So I'm more than happy to see our community have the one opportunity per month for them to raise their concerns with us in a formal environment so they feel heard.
Councillor Maxwell, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to support something like this. We've all often talked about being open and transparent. This is a good way. And let's welcome it. It's our community up there. Most who might come and have business with council, be it our full council meeting or hearings, it's a bit too formal for some of them, whereas this one is a bit more manageable, I believe. And deep down, it's not too hard. It really isn't too hard. It'll get us closer to our community, another opportunity. But I think the other one, as we're planning some of the criteria, 6 weeks out from the elections, cut it off then, because there'd be too many coming electioneering, I think. But little things like that. But to me, let's welcome it. I think 85% already, that's higher than I even thought. And so, whilst we always like to try and be leaders, we're going to be followers in this one. But let's do something first. But Aroha Mai didn't support. I felt for council meetings, if it's going so successful, well, the next term or whatever, people can add more if they think. But you have to try it first to see how well we do. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do support this, and I agree with Councillor Maxwell on most of those points. I do like the idea of 5 working days' notice to get it on the agenda. I do like the idea of not including anything relating to the day's business. And I would see this as a trial potentially until the end of the triennium and then a review at that time. And I do like Councillor Maxwell's suggestion of cutting it off 6 weeks in advance of the election. So I think there is some groundwork. Potentially it's messy, but I think I would take messy for the sake of democracy over tidy for process. So I do support it.
Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. Just a couple of points I'd like to make, please. The first is that I think we saw during the LTP submissions, we had children in a wide range of the community find ways to come and share their views in person. So I don't think it's a concern around equity of being able to come and share in that forum. The second point is I read within recent correspondence from the Mayor on public forums the following statements: that democracy is important and authentic and meaningful engagement with our community is a key priority of this council, and we currently allow petitions which require others to also support the issue before it's brought to council. And yet it was decided that Mataara Mai could not present or speak to their petition despite having 1,125 members of our Rotorua community sign the petition, and as I said earlier, 60 local businesses writing letters of support. It appears that none of the restrictions listed in the report that we've received, where the chairperson has the discretion to decline to hear a speaker, limit topics to only those that council staff deem relevant to council meetings. So the main reason I support public forums, and I will support this motion, is to give our community the opportunity to speak directly to councillors and senior staff on kaupapa that are important to our community members, especially where there are no public consultation processes available to them. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm, the petition this morning was declined because it did not relate to council business. The public forums also need to relate to council business, so that would not have changed in that instance as well. Sorry, I'll just read this copy because my laptop's turned off. On page 30, in point 15, it says must fall within the terms of reference of that body. So for us, it's the council meeting, so it must fall within the terms of reference of the council meeting. Oh, 15.0, public forums, just that last line around any issue, idea or matter raised in the public forum must fall within the terms of reference of that body. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Just to echo some of the comments supporting this initiative, I just would also like to say that to be sure that this is actually not overburdening our staff and creating issues, it's probably a good idea to review the process towards the end of the triennium so that we actually evaluate how it's going and the workload on the staff and anything other things that we might need to consider going forward. So there needs to be space perhaps in this process for that review and evaluation. Thank you.
And Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manakura. Just to reiterate what Councillor Barker said, I presume at the next council, or sorry, whatever the new council looks like after the next election, these standing orders would come up for review or adoption, so I take it at that time they would probably be enough time for us. I do just follow up, if that's okay, with Councillor Kiriopa, because, and as you always know, I always respect the Chair's decision, even when it doesn't agree with mine. But when we say what matters, where it's the reference of that body, now I'll be up front, I would not have supported Councillor Kiriopa's motion today had it been put on the table. But from me, I didn't quite understand how on one point we were saying that we were being requested to make a recommendation, to pass a resolution for central government, yet on the other hand, we've done exactly that with our LGNZ resolutions, where we're advocating for central government to take some points. Some may not quite see it as apples and apples or apples and pears, I get that. But for me, I'm certainly in favour of it. I think it's going to be a little bit messy, I think, as Councillor Brown said, but I think we can work together on this and bring it forward to where it's useful and helpful, as the LTP hearings were for many of us, to hear the feelings, but also aspects of the community that we perhaps hadn't thought about. So I'll be in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the start of this term, we adopted the standing orders. Standing Order 3.3 says members must obey standing orders. These are the rules that we agreed with. So I would suggest that as a starting point, rather than looking at flirting with modifying restrictions or whatever, we stick to the standing orders that we agreed on at the start of the term. If there's any tweaks required in the next triennium, well, that's for them, but these are the orders that we adopted this time. So let's stick to those restrictions as stated in the standing orders would be my suggestion. I don't anticipate that this will be onerous. Freedom of speech, which is the second time this has been raised in the meeting today, is simply a case of giving the public an opportunity to talk to us. We're not here to censor them. We're not here to control what they have to say unless they're using colourful language or something like that. It should be simply a case of them having to state the general topic of what they want to talk to us about. They don't need to be interrogated beforehand. It's simply a case of getting a rough idea of what subject they want to talk about and get to it. It's very little administration required as far as I could see. But, hey, obviously I support it. I was disappointed when the Lakeland Queen were denied presenting a petition to us. They were denied under the standing orders speaking to us under public forum. We can at least give the people a chance, an opportunity to come and talk to us if they've got something, anything on their mind, anything relevant to council business on their mind.
Councillor Waddy, just checking, were you wanting to say something?
No, not at this stage, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Wang.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just like to actually probably take a bit of a contrary view to the majority of speakers so far. I would be in line to not support this as the reasons that that Your Worship has already mentioned. I think some of the arguments around accessibility, I guess elected members' accessibility, all of our contact details are public. Many of us are very accessible within the community, and so I guess that aspect is, I think, pretty well covered through those areas, and I think every one of us makes ourselves available to any member of the public who wish to speak to us about any certain issue. The more significant issues, there's the, as it's been mentioned, the petition pathway for those more significant issues, and so I think it's already pretty well covered. The public forums, I do have that concern around the extra strain that it would put onto onto staff, the added pressures that it would add on to staff workloads, but also I think if it were to go ahead, and it looks like based off the conversations around the tables, looks like it will have support, then I would be definitely in favour of the 5-day ahead of time notification, as well as those restrictions, and only just for the council meeting. I would be happy with those terms if it went ahead, but I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to everyone, it seems to be there's fairly strong support for having public forums back on the agenda. I had raised some concerns at the beginning, which I think Councillor Brown and Councillor Barker, and I think maybe a couple of others, just around making sure that the guidelines are, or the policy in which we implement these are fit for purpose. Councillor Maxwell was around electioneering. So I'm wondering, to ensure that we get this right, that we're not just simply following the guidelines set out in the standing order, but maybe we should say that yes, we will do these, but maybe after updating the guidelines to capture the matters raised by councillors at this meeting in reference to notice periods, ceasing at the, whatever we call it, the election period, and no forums at a meeting where a council decision is being made later on in that agenda. So probably that wording just needs to be refined a little bit, but effectively just making sure that, because there seems to be a support for this, that we just get this right, because I'm not sure that just simply adopting the guidelines is what I would feel comfortable with if we don't do that. And I could move an amendment if I could see if there was anyone that would be happy to second that. Otherwise, I would vote no for the way that...
Thank you. It's a very fair point, because it has been raised by councillors that are saying they would support it if it had that. I've just had confirmation that we can just take, the staff are able to just incorporate that into the public forum, so we can update the criteria around that accordingly. So if I can just reflect back what I've heard, it's 5 working days, not including what's related to the day's business, and also cutting out at a 6-week period. I've heard election period from Councillor Kaifong. I would be a lot more comfortable with election period, which I think that's 3 months ahead of, but that's within the election period is when people have said whether they're going to be candidates or not. So that's why I suggest that. Are those who suggested 6 weeks okay to take it as the election period? Thank you. Okay, we've had a number of nods around the table. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Te Manukura. Sorry, could I just ask you and the Chief Executive to refresh my memory? So before an election date, there's no council meetings, we move into caretaker status. Do we not 2 months out? Sorry, approximately, if you could reflect.
Through you, Your Worship. The election period will start in July. It's a 3-month period before the elections. The council are still operating as the council of this district up until election day. However, past experience has shown, in terms of setting the calendar for meetings, is that councillors and councillors around the table at the moment are all out and about actively campaigning. So the month of September, we have in the past kept that completely free of meetings, so that you can get on to the job of electioneering and stuff. So we will run meetings in July and August, but there will be a little bit more rigour put around, I guess, the standing orders and the conduct of councillors during that period, to show and recognise the difference between electioneering versus your business as usual.
Good luck interpreting that one. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was made pretty clear, actually, and has a lot of reason and logic behind that. But thank you. Okay, we'll take a question of clarity because we have had...
Yes, just, sorry, I didn't quite understand that. So are you saying that there will be probably won't be a council meeting as such in September? So August, we're proposing that not have a forum in it, is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, I understand from the nods around the table that the council is talking about the election period, so there would be no forums in the month of July through to the bringing in of a new council in October.
So our council meetings are usually only at the end of the month, correct? So it's only like a few more days. See what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, no, I know that. No, I'm talking about that if we're only having one council meeting at the end of July, the election period starts at the beginning of July. Is that correct?
We don't know until the election date is set, but I'd like to stop focusing on elections and focus on the public forum for us. But sorry, we won't know until the election date is set, which is set independently. We don't.
So we're going to lose one anyway, and you're saying two more?
Potentially two.
Well, 3 in total, because September's included.
There won't be a meeting.
Correct. Yeah. So okay.
Do you have a question of clarity? Because we've finished discussion.
Yes, I hope we're not making amendments by nods of the head around the table. If Councillor Kai Fong wishes to...
It's not an amendment, Councillor Leave. As we do take action points, we have a pretty clear indication above to include public forums. The staff has taken down the feedback and the direction that has been given by elected members.
Following the guidelines set out in the Standing Order 15. If we're going to depart from Standing Order 15, we should be voting on an amendment to...
We've been advised that's not necessary.
I'm happy to put the amendment if that helps.
I don't. I'm quite clear from the council, from the discussion, what you want. If you...
It's...
Well,
we don't need an amendment.
I would be voting against most of what Councillor Kai Fong proposed because...
We won't bother with an amendment. This is usual practice. The staff take on board the feedback and direction we've given, and that has been quite clear. Thank you. So, finally, I haven't had my say on this yet. So the public forums have made my view on it quite clear. I do still have some concerns around it. I would be very open-minded to exploring, I would have been open-minded to exploring public forums in another term. What I am really mindful of is that we already have a significant work stream that we're trying to get through, and our public actually have a number of ways that they already do utilise to connect with us as elected members. I, on a daily basis, have people connect with me through email, through phone, online, sharing their concerns and their issues. And often outside of the usual workday, which is very long for me, I am also connecting and taking the opportunity to hear from our public in forums, taking the opportunity to hear from our public in forums before work hours, sometimes early as the 7 a.m. Rotary meetings, and also in the evening, which can go very late. But what I'm trying to express is I know that there is criticism that not supporting public forums means that you're not supporting democracy. Well, actually, democracy was the people that voted for us to be here around the table to make our decisions. And we have always, here, because we haven't had public forums in the past, found ways to be able to bring through our community's concerns, just as we did with the significant amount of long-term plan consultation, where we have hearings, where the public turned up, they shared their views, and we changed our minds accordingly. And just as we have with other project-specific matters, such as the lakefront, where instead of just taking feedback online, we also invited the school children into us to be able to give us feedback on specific issues. The future development strategy is just another example of the broad amount of community engagement that we undertake. So I just want to stress the point that While this will be an addition, we have already had existing mechanisms for people to be able to connect with us, and I'm always grateful for them for doing so. I'm also very aware, if I can be honest, that Councillor Lee has raised this, and he is pushing for public forums because he has not been successful in some of the petitions that he has been lobbying members of the community to actually put forward. So my uncomfortableness with this is also behind the intention, and that I do not believe that his intention of raising this was for accessibility for everyone, but to further assist his case when he has not been successful with getting them through in petitions. So I prefer petitions as a final point because it actually ensures that there are other people in the community that support that cause. And as I've already expressed, I think that it does leave the process vulnerable for individual issues and matters, which are already able to be resolved through requests for service, which our council receives many on a daily basis, or also connecting one-on-one. So I appreciate that the majority of council are keen to introduce and to trial public forums, and I'm happy to support public forums moving forward if that is the case, as they will come to council meeting. But I do still hold the concerns, and I'm happy to be proven wrong in future regarding that. So I hope that if they are put in, we do see a wide range of our community, and not just those who are privileged enough to not have to work and to not have to be at home with family or in school or study. So we look forward to seeing what's about to come our way. So that has been moved and seconded. We've taken down those extra points. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any against? Thank you, that is carried. Councillor Wari, was that against?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, that has been carried. Thank you very much, everyone. We now have progress reports.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I've got to take my leave now. Thank you. I'm just going to the mara. So, hey,
Thank you very much, Councillor Waru. And we note his apology as he is unfortunately attending a funeral this afternoon. So I'd like to just take all three of the progress reports in one and as read. And I ask if there are any questions. First of all, the corporate services report on page 35. Sorry. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the corporate services, corporate planning and governance, and also Rotorua partnerships? That's moved Councillor Brown and Councillor Barker. All those in favour to receive, please say aye. Thank you. Any questions on corporate services, page 35 to 41? Maybe not. Any for corporate planning and governance? Page 41 to page 50. I'll give you a moment. And then finally, any questions on page 50 to 55 Rotorua partnerships, or any others if you haven't had time? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 51, there's a reference to newly developed iwi narrative guidelines document. Could that be circulated to the elected members, please?
Certainly, I'll ask our staff member involved in that to circulate that with the councillors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anita. We will note that as an action point. Look forward to reading that. And just checking were there any other questions. Sorry, Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanting Thomas just to confirm for the community's benefit why we don't have a financial report this month, given that we are at the end of our financial year.
For you, Worship, it's because we're at the end of the financial year. We leave our ledgers open for another 2 weeks to make sure that we capture all of our end-of-year transactions. And so with the timing of the council meeting, we weren't able to produce the draft 12-month result, and we're looking to present that to you at next month's council meeting.
Thank you. There appear to be no further questions. Thank you. So we will move into public excluded. We have 3 items for consideration, but I do believe we can get through that rather promptly. So I just advise that the 3 items for public excluded session today is number 1, confidential minutes from council meeting held 26th of June, number 2, confidential minutes from the confidential meeting held on 3rd of July, and also number 3, appointment of board member for council controlled organisation. Reasons for going into confidential are to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons, and number 2, maintain effective conduct of public affairs through free and frank expression of opinions by or between or 2 members or officers or employees of any local authority in the course of their duty. May I please have a mover and a seconder? That's moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Thank you. We'll just allow a moment to switch off live stream.